If you can't handle me sleeping with the CEO and your friends, then leave. They're real men. Not impotent, my wife snapped. I smiled coldly. As you wish. The next morning, my three friends, my wife and her CEO landed in the ER with matching symptoms. Then the doctor entered the room. Guys, this is hard to say, but you know what's funny about loyalty? It's like buying insurance for a house that's already burning down. You keep paying premiums, thinking you're protected, while the flames are literally licking at your ankles. My name is Michael Harland, and at 36 years old, I'd spent the better part of my adult life believing that loyalty was the golden ticket to a decent existence. Turns out, I was about as wrong as a GPS trying to navigate the Bermuda Triangle. For 8 years, I'd been working sanitation for the city of Chicago. Yeah, I know what you're thinking, glamorous, right? Nothing says living the dream, like emptying trash cans at 5 a.m. while dodging used condoms and half-eaten pizza slices that probably violated several health codes. But here's the kicker that nobody knew, not even my wife. While I was collecting garbage by day, I was quietly building a crypto fortune that would make most Wall Street bros weep into their overpriced lattes. See, back in 2015, when Bitcoin was cheaper than a decent bottle of wine, I started throwing every spare dollar I could scrape together into various cryptocurrencies. While everyone else was laughing at digital monopoly money, I was studying charts, reading white papers, and basically becoming a financial ninja in my spare time. The beauty of being invisible, which, let's face it, is exactly what you become when you're wearing a city sanitation uniform, is that nobody pays attention to what you're doing with your money. They just assume you don't have any. By 2023, my portfolio was sitting pretty at around $4 million. Not bad for a guy whose job title officially read Waste Management Technician, huh? But did I go around bragging about it? Did I buy a Ferrari and start acting like some crypto bro douchebag? Hell no. I kept my mouth shut, drove my beat-up Honda Civic, and continued living like a normal human being. Because that's what loyal people do. They don't rock the boat, they don't show off, and they sure as hell don't make their partners feel insecure about money. Which brings me to my wife, Celeste. Beautiful, ambitious, and with the emotional depth of a puddle in the Sahara Desert. We'd been married for 6 years, and for most of that time, I genuinely believed we were building something together. She was working on her influencer career, because apparently having opinions about skincare routines and posting thirst traps disguised as lifestyle content is a legitimate profession now, while I provided the steady income and emotional support. Classic arrangement, right? The dependable husband holding down the fort while the wife chases her dreams. Except somewhere along the way, chasing dreams became chasing other men's dicks, and apparently I was too stupid to notice. Or maybe I was just too damn loyal to want to see it. The breaking point came on a Tuesday night in March. I remember it was Tuesday because that's trash pickup day in our neighborhood, and I'd just gotten home from a particularly brutal shift involving what I can only describe as a crime scene disguised as a dumpster behind a seafood restaurant. I was tired, I smelled like low tide mixed with regret, and all I wanted was a shower and maybe some leftover Chinese food. Instead, I walked into what felt like an episode of Jerry Springer directed by Satan himself. Celeste was sitting at our kitchen table, phone in hand, looking like she'd just won the lottery and simultaneously discovered the cure for cancer. That should have been my first red flag. Nobody looks that pleased with themselves unless they're about to drop a bomb that would make Hiroshima look like a firecracker. "We need to talk," she said, which in married couple speak translates to "you're about to get emotionally waterboarded, so buckle up, Buttercup." I sat down across from her, still in my work clothes, probably leaving a faint aroma of garbage and broken dreams in my wake. "What's up, babe?" She looked me dead in the eye, and I mean dead, like she was staring at a particularly disappointing piece of roadkill, and delivered the line that would change everything. "If you can't handle me sleeping with the CEO and your friends, then leave. They're real men, not impotent." Now, let me pause here for a second to address that last part. Impotent. Really? That was her big finishing move? I mean, if you're going to gut a man like a fish, at least be creative about it. Impotent is what middle schoolers use when they run out of actually hurtful things to say. But the real kicker wasn't the insult itself. It was the casual way she dropped the bomb about sleeping with multiple people I trusted. The CEO, my friends, plural, as in more than one. For about 30 seconds, I just sat there, processing this information like a computer trying to run Crisis on Windows 95. Part of me wanted to ask for clarification. Which friends, exactly? How long had this been going on? Did they have a group chat where they compared notes about my performance in bed? But another part of me, the part that had been quietly building a crypto empire while taking out the trash, recognized this moment for what it really was. An opportunity. See, here's what Celeste didn't understand about loyalty. It's not weakness. It's not being a pushover or a doormat or whatever other furniture-based metaphor she probably used when talking about me to her new boyfriends. Loyalty is strategic patience. It's gathering information, building resources, and waiting for exactly the right moment to make your move. And brother, she had just given me that moment on a silver platter. Instead of yelling, instead of crying, instead of doing any of the dramatic bullshit she was probably expecting, I smiled. Not a happy smile. More like the kind of smile you'd see on a shark right before it turns a surfer into an all-you-can-eat buffet. As you wish, I said, standing up from the table with the kind of calm that probably should have terrified her. But Celeste was too busy basking in what she thought was her moment of triumph to notice that she'd just declared war on someone who'd spent years learning how to be invisible, patient, and ruthlessly efficient. That night, while she was probably texting her new boyfriends about how she'd finally gotten rid of the dead weight, I sat in my home office and began making lists. Not angry, emotional lists, methodical, military precision lists. Names, addresses, schedules, weaknesses, financial situations, social media accounts, business relationships. My military training from my 20s started whispering in the back of my head like an old friend offering advice. Surveillance, documentation, patience, strategy. Celeste thought she was getting rid of a weak, impotent husband. What she'd actually done was unleash someone who'd spent years quietly learning how to wage war in the shadows. And the best part? She had absolutely no idea what was coming. You know that feeling when you're watching a horror movie and the main character decides to investigate the creepy noise in the basement? That moment where you're screaming at the screen, "Don't go down there, you absolute moron." Well, turns out I was living in my own personal horror flick, except instead of a basement full of demons, I had a life full of backstabbing assholes who I'd stupidly considered family. It wasn't just Celeste. Oh no, that would have been too simple, too clean. Like finding out your dentist has been overcharging you versus discovering your entire medical team has been harvesting your organs while you sleep. The betrayal ran deeper than a Kardashian's fake tan, and it involved pretty much every person I'd trusted over the past decade. Let me paint you a picture of my personal Judas collection, starting with Dean Matthews. This guy was supposed to be my brother from another mother, the kind of friend you call when you need help moving a couch or hiding a body. Not that I'd ever actually hidden a body, but you get the metaphor. Dean owned CrossFit Revolution downtown, one of those places where people pay obscene amounts of money to lift heavy things and then post about it on Instagram like they've just discovered fire. I'd met Dean 6 years ago when I was going through what I now recognize as a midlife crisis disguised as a fitness journey. You know the drill. 30-year-old man suddenly realizes he's shaped like a deflated balloon animal and decides to do something about it. Dean was the trainer who helped me transform from guy who gets winded walking upstairs to guy who can actually see his own feet without a mirror. We bonded over shared workouts, weekend barbecues, and what I thought was genuine friendship. Turns out, Dean's definition of brotherhood included screwing my wife behind my back while I was out collecting garbage to pay for the gym membership that was keeping me in shape for her enjoyment. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a protein shake. Then there was Tyler Morrison, my crypto trading buddy who I'd helped get started in the digital currency game back when he thought blockchain was something you used to secure a bicycle. This dude owed me everything, and I mean everything. When he was living in his mom's basement, subsisting on ramen noodles and false hope, I was the one who walked him through his first Bitcoin purchase. I shared my research, my strategies, my hard-earned knowledge about market patterns and trading psychology. Fast forward to 2023, and Tyler was pulling in 6 figures a year trading crypto, living in a downtown loft that probably cost more per month than most people's annual salary. He'd transformed from basement-dwelling neckbeard to slick financial wizard, complete with the kind of designer wardrobe that screams, "I have more money than sense." And how did he thank me for jump-starting his entire career? By joining my wife's little harem while probably using profits from strategies I taught him to buy her expensive gifts. The third musketeer in this circus of betrayal was Malik Rodriguez, a real estate hustler who I'd literally saved from financial ruin 3 years ago. Malik was the kind of guy who could sell ice to Eskimos and somehow make them feel grateful for the privilege. He specialized in flipping houses in up-and-coming neighborhoods, riding the wave of gentrification like some kind of capitalist surfer. But even the smoothest talkers sometimes bite off more than they can chew, and Malik had gotten himself into a situation involving a property deal gone wrong, some very unhappy investors, and what I suspected were connections to people who solved business disputes with crowbars rather than lawyers. When he came to me, desperate and scared, I didn't hesitate to lend him 50 grand from my crypto stash to make his problems disappear. Did I ask for a contract? Nope. Did I demand collateral? Hell no. Because that's what friends do for each other, right? They help without keeping score. They trust without documentation. They believe in each other even when logic suggests otherwise. Malik paid me back within 6 months, plus interest, and I thought that was the end of it. Just a friend helping a friend through a rough patch. What I didn't realize was that I'd apparently purchased a premium membership to the Let's All Bang Michael's Wife Club, with Malik as one of the founding members. And then there was the ringleader himself, Victor Langford, CEO of Apex Fitness Empire, a guy who'd built his fortune selling overpriced gym equipment and supplements to people desperate enough to believe that six-pack abs could be purchased rather than earned. Victor was the kind of man who wore suits that cost more than most people's cars, drove a Lamborghini like it was a civic duty, and treated women like collectible trading cards. He was also Celeste's boss, technically speaking. She'd started working for Apex as a brand ambassador, which as far as I could tell involved posting workout videos and sports bras that could double as dental floss and attending company events where she smiled pretty for investors. It was supposed to be her big break into the influencer world, her chance to build the kind of personal brand that would make her independently wealthy and famous. What I didn't know was that Victor's hiring process apparently included a very thorough orientation period that had nothing to do with company policies and everything to do with his personal entertainment. He saw my wife as just another trophy to add to his collection, another conquest to brag about in whatever rich guy locker rooms he frequented. The worst part? They all knew about each other. This wasn't a case of multiple affairs happening in isolation. This was a coordinated effort, a group project in humiliation. They had group chats where they joked about me, called me the furniture husband, because I was always there but never really noticed. Victor bragged about breaking in my wife like a company car, treating her like some kind of lease vehicle that he could test drive whenever the mood struck. My so-called friends joked about how clueless I was, how I'd never figure out what was happening right under my nose. They made bets about how long it would take me to catch on, shared stories about close calls when I almost walked in on something, laughed about the elaborate lies they had to construct to keep me in the dark. Every message I later discovered felt like a paper cut to the soul. Not because they were sleeping with my wife. Honestly, by that point I was more offended by her taste in men than anything else. But because of the casual cruelty, the complete lack of respect, the way they'd turned my trust into entertainment. Dean, who I'd spotted at the gym, who I'd helped through his own relationship problems, who'd been to my house for dinner countless times. Tyler, who owed his entire career to my guidance and support. Malik, who I'd literally saved from financial ruin. And Victor, who'd never met a boundary he wouldn't cross if it meant adding another notch to his designer belt. They thought they were so clever, so sophisticated, pulling one over on the dumb garbage man who was too stupid to see what was happening in his own marriage. They underestimated one crucial thing. Invisible doesn't mean powerless. That night, as I sat in my home office surrounded by evidence of their betrayal, I wasn't thinking about revenge in the traditional sense. I was thinking about justice, about consequences, about teaching some very expensive lessons to people who clearly needed their education updated. Military training had taught me that the best battles are won before the enemy even realizes they're at war. Here's something they don't teach you in marriage counseling. When your entire world implodes, you have two choices. You can either lose your shit like a contestant on a reality TV show, or you can channel your inner Navy SEAL and start planning the most methodical takedown since the Watergate investigation. Guess which route I chose? Instead of rage, I chose precision. Instead of screaming matches and thrown dishes, I went full-on Jason Bourne. Except instead of fighting international assassins, I was collecting evidence on a bunch of idiots who thought they were smarter than the invisible garbage man. My military training, which had been gathering dust in the back of my brain like an old exercise bike, suddenly came roaring back to life with the clarity of a church bell. The Army had taught me 3 fundamental principles that applied perfectly to civilian warfare: surveil, document, wait. It's like the holy trinity of revenge, except instead of salvation, you get the sweet satisfaction of watching your enemies destroy themselves with their own stupidity. First step, surveillance. Now, when most people think surveillance, they picture some guy in a van with binoculars and a thermos full of cold coffee. But modern surveillance is way more sophisticated and infinitely more satisfying. We live in the golden age of digital stupidity, where people document their own crimes and post them on social media like they're applying for awards in the worst human being category. I started with their phones. Not hacking. I'm not some basement-dwelling cybercriminal. I'm talking about good old-fashioned social engineering mixed with the kind of access you get when people trust you enough to leave their devices lying around. Amazing how much incriminating evidence people keep on devices they think are private, especially when those people are arrogant enough to believe they're untouchable. Dean was the easiest target because the guy's password security was about as strong as wet toilet paper. His gym required members to connect to the Wi-Fi, and since I'd helped him set up the network originally, I knew exactly how to monitor traffic. Every text, every photo, every late-night video call with my wife. All of it flowing through systems I had legitimate access to maintain. Tyler was trickier because crypto traders tend to be more paranoid about digital security, but paranoia doesn't help when you're stupid enough to use the same coffee shop Wi-Fi every morning to check your personal accounts. 3 weeks of patient observation, and I had enough screenshots to make a coffee table book titled How to Destroy Your Life in 140 Characters or Less. Malik was practically handing me evidence on a silver platter. The guy was so obsessed with documenting his lifestyle on Instagram that he was essentially providing a real-time itinerary of when and where he was cheating on his girlfriend with my wife. Nothing says criminal mastermind like posting time-stamped photos of yourself outside a hotel you're definitely not supposed to be at. But the real goldmine was their group chat. Oh sweet Jesus, their group chat was like Christmas morning wrapped in a birthday party and delivered by unicorns. These geniuses had created a private messaging group where they shared photos, videos, and detailed commentary about their adventures with Celeste. They called it the furniture store, get it? Because I was the furniture husband. Hilarious, right? Really showcasing that Ivy League creativity. In this digital treasure trove of stupidity, Victor bragged about breaking in my wife like a company car, complete with photos that would have made a porn director blush. Dean shared workout videos that definitely weren't focused on proper form. Tyler posted crypto trading tips mixed with intimate details that I really didn't need to know, but was absolutely going to use against him. And Malik? Malik was documenting real estate deals that suddenly made a lot more sense when you realized they involved properties where he was taking my wife for private showings. Every message was another nail in their collective coffin, another piece of evidence that would come in handy when the time was right. They thought they were so clever, so untouchable, sharing their conquest like fraternity brothers comparing notes after a kegger. What they didn't realize was that they were essentially creating a prosecutor's wet dream, a comprehensive record of their own destruction. The beauty of digital evidence is that it's persistent. Delete a message? Doesn't matter. I'd already screenshotted it. Clear your browser history? Too late, buddy. I'd already captured those hotel booking confirmations. Try to cover your tracks? Sorry, but when you're dealing with someone who understands how technology actually works, your amateur hour privacy measures are about as effective as a chocolate teapot. While I was building my evidence portfolio, I was also making physical preparations. I rented a small apartment across town under a business name I'd registered years ago for crypto trading. Nothing fancy, just a basic one-bedroom that could serve as a command center, complete with multiple laptops, backup drives, and enough coffee to fuel a small army. Think of it as my personal war room. Except instead of planning military operations, I was orchestrating the downfall of people who richly deserved what was coming. The apartment also served as storage for equipment I'd need later. Recording devices small enough to hide in plain sight, GPS trackers that could be discreetly attached to vehicles, and surveillance cameras that could be disguised as everyday objects. All perfectly legal to purchase, all completely undetectable when used properly, all devastatingly effective when deployed by someone who actually knew what they were doing. But hardware was only half the equation. The real weapon was going to be human intelligence, and for that, I needed an inside ally. Someone with access to places I couldn't go, someone with skills I didn't have, someone with their own reasons for wanting to see justice done. That's when I remembered Tamara Lee. Tamara was a former medical technician who'd gotten screwed over by the healthcare system in ways that would make your blood boil. She'd been working at Chicago General, pulling night shifts and saving lives, when budget cuts and administrative politics had forced her out of a career she'd trained years for. Now she was working at a coffee shop downtown, serving overpriced lattes to people who made more in a day than she used to make in a month. But here's the thing about Tamara. She owed me a favor. A big one. About 2 years ago, when she was going through her own financial crisis after losing her hospital job, I'd helped her avoid eviction by covering 3 months of rent. Not as a loan, as a gift. Because that's what decent people do when they see someone struggling through no fault of their own. I'd stayed in touch with Tamara, checking in periodically to make sure she was doing okay, never expecting anything in return. Just basic human decency, the kind of behavior that apparently makes you a sucker in today's world. But now, as I sat in my new command center surrounded by evidence of betrayal, I realized that sometimes doing the right thing pays dividends in ways you never expect. Tamara had medical training, access to laboratory equipment through her current job's connections, and most importantly, a legitimate reason to be angry at people who thought they were better than everyone else. She was perfect for what I had in mind. The plan was starting to come together, piece by methodical piece. You know what they say about gift horses and looking them in the mouth? Well, sometimes the universe delivers exactly what you need wrapped up in such a perfect bow that you'd be stupid not to take it. And brother, what Celeste handed me next was like Christmas, my birthday, and winning the lottery all rolled into one beautifully ironic package. It was a Wednesday morning in early April when my darling wife came bouncing into the kitchen like a caffeinated cheerleader who'd just discovered the meaning of life. She was practically vibrating with excitement, clutching her phone like it contained the secrets to eternal youth and unlimited Instagram followers. Which, knowing Celeste, it probably did. "Michael, honey," she said, and I knew immediately that whatever was coming next was going to be either expensive or stupid, possibly both. When your wife starts a sentence with honey, in that particular tone, it's like hearing the Jaws theme song. You know something's about to bite you in the ass. "I have the most amazing idea for growing my brand," she continued, completely oblivious to the fact that her brand was currently built on sleeping with half the city's male population. "Victor thinks it would be perfect for Apex Fitness, and all the guys are totally on board." Now, when she said, all the guys, I knew exactly which guys she was talking about. Dean, Tyler, Malik, and Victor, the founding members of the Let's Screw Michael's Wife Club. But I just smiled and nodded like the supportive husband I was pretending to be, waiting to hear what brilliant scheme they'd cooked up this time. "We're going to launch a men's health awareness campaign," she announced, like she'd just discovered the cure for cancer. "Think about it. It's socially conscious, it's timely, and it's exactly the kind of content that goes viral. We'll do health screenings, educational content, maybe even partner with local hospitals for authenticity." I had to hand it to her. For someone whose idea of medical knowledge came from Googling detox teas and waist trainers, she'd stumbled onto something that was actually socially useful. Men's health awareness was a legitimate cause, something that could genuinely help people while also generating the kind of positive publicity that influencers live for. But here's where it got interesting. As she kept talking, gesticulating wildly with her phone, and occasionally pausing to take selfies to document this creative breakthrough, I realized that she was basically handing me the perfect cover for what I had planned. "Victor's company will sponsor the whole thing," she continued, completely unaware that she was essentially writing my script for me. "Dean's gym will be the location. Tyler's going to handle the social media marketing because he's so good with online engagement, and Malik knows people in the medical field who can help with the actual testing." It was like watching someone build their own gallows while humming a happy tune. Every detail she shared was another piece falling perfectly into place for my master plan. They wanted to do health screenings? Perfect. They wanted medical professionals involved? Even better. They wanted to make it a big public event with lots of documentation and social media coverage? Outstanding. But the real cherry on top came when Celeste added. And of course, I'll be participating too. I mean, we should practice what we preach, right? Plus, it'll be great for the optics, showing that this isn't just about men's health, but about health awareness in general. I swear, if I'd been drinking coffee at that moment, I would have choked on it. Not from surprise, but from trying not to laugh out loud. She was literally volunteering to be included in something that could potentially expose all of them, and she thought it was a marketing strategy. That sounds amazing, babe, I said, putting on my best supportive husband voice. Really innovative. I'm proud of you for thinking of something so meaningful. And I genuinely was proud, in a twisted sort of way. She'd managed to create the perfect scenario for her own downfall without even realizing it. It was like watching someone enthusiastically dig their own grave while live streaming the process for their followers. Over the next few days, I watched as the whole group threw themselves into planning this campaign with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for cult activities or pyramid schemes. Dean was excited about showcasing his gym as a health-focused community space. Tyler was already designing social media graphics and planning influencer outreach. Malik was leveraging his real estate connections to find medical professionals who might want to participate. And Victor? Victor was just basking in the glow of what he thought would be another publicity win for Apex Fitness. Meanwhile, I was having daily conversations with Tamara, fine-tuning the details of how we could turn their awareness campaign into something far more educational than they'd bargained for. Tamara still had connections in the medical field, people who owed her favors or respected her enough to help with what she thought was a legitimate health initiative. The beauty of it, Tamara said during one of our planning sessions at her coffee shop, is that we'll be conducting real tests using real equipment. Everything will be completely legitimate from a medical standpoint. We're just going to be very creative about how we interpret and present the results. See, here's something most people don't understand about medical testing. It's all about context and presentation. The same test results can tell very different stories depending on how they're framed, what additional factors are considered, and how the information is communicated to the patient. A skilled medical professional can take perfectly normal results and present them in a way that would make a hypochondriac reach for their emergency Xanax. Not that we were planning to fake anything. That would be illegal, unethical, and completely unnecessary. What we were planning was far more elegant. We were going to give them exactly what they asked for, just with a few additional layers of complexity that they weren't expecting. The Men's Health Awareness campaign was scheduled for the first week of May, giving us about 3 weeks to prepare. 3 weeks to set up equipment, coordinate with medical professionals, and make sure every single detail was perfect. Because when you're dealing with people who think they're smarter than everyone else, you don't get second chances. During those 3 weeks, I watched my wife and her boy toys planning their event with the kind of naive enthusiasm that would have been adorable if it weren't so misguided. They created promotional materials, reached out to local media, and even managed to get some legitimate health organizations to endorse the campaign. They thought they were building something meaningful, something that would enhance their reputations and advance their careers. What they were actually doing was constructing the stage for their own very public humiliation. And the best part? They were doing all the work themselves. I just had to sit back, smile supportively, and make sure everything went exactly according to plan. The irony was so perfect it was almost artistic. If you've ever been to a high school reunion, you know that special kind of energy that fills the air when people are trying way too hard to impress each other. Now imagine that same energy. But instead of, look how successful I am 20 years later, it's look how healthy and socially conscious I am while secretly screwing my friend's wife. That was the vibe at CrossFit Revolution on the morning of May 6th, the day that would go down in my personal history as the day everything went according to plan. The gym had been transformed into what looked like a legitimate medical facility, crossed with a social media content creator's wet dream. Tamara and her team had set up testing stations that would have made a real hospital jealous. Blood pressure monitors, portable blood testing equipment, body composition analyzers, and enough medical-looking machinery to convince anyone that this was the real deal. Which, technically it was. We weren't cutting any corners on the actual medical side of things. We were just being very creative about what we planned to do with the results. Dean arrived first, because of course he did. The man couldn't resist being the center of attention at his own gym, strutting around in shorts that were probably more expensive than most people's rent, flexing for anyone with a camera or pulse. He'd spent the better part of the previous week promoting the event on social media, posting shirtless workout videos with captions about taking charge of your health and being a real man means getting tested. The irony was so thick you could have used it as protein powder. "Bro, this is going to be epic," he kept saying to anyone who would listen, flexing his biceps every few words like he had some kind of neurological condition that required constant muscle contractions. "We're really making a difference here, you know? Changing lives, raising awareness, being leaders in the community." Yeah, Dean. Real leaders. The kind who sleep with their friends' wives while preaching about integrity and brotherhood. Tyler showed up about 20 minutes later, looking like he'd stepped out of a crypto trading magazine. If such a thing existed, which honestly, it probably does. Designer everything, perfectly styled hair, and that particular brand of confidence that comes from making obscene amounts of money doing something most people don't understand. He immediately started taking selfies with the medical equipment, probably planning to post them later with captions about investing in health and diversifying your portfolio of wellness. "This is brilliant marketing," he told Celeste, who was practically glowing from the attention. "The engagement metrics on this are going to be insane. I'm seeing brand partnerships, sponsored content, maybe even a documentary deal if we play this right." Malik rolled up fashionably late, because punctuality is apparently for poor people. He was driving his latest acquisition, a Tesla Model S that he'd probably bought with profits from real estate deals that may or may not have been entirely legal. The man had a gift for making everything look effortless, from his perfectly pressed casual wear to the way he seemed to glide rather than walk. He was already working the room before he'd even officially arrived, shaking hands and networking like this was a Chamber of Commerce meeting instead of a health screening. "Michael, my man," he called out when he spotted me cleaning equipment in the background. "This whole thing is incredible. Your wife is a genius, absolutely brilliant. We should talk about doing something similar for some of my property developments, community health initiatives, you know? Great for property values and public relations." I smiled and nodded, playing my role as the supportive background husband while internally calculating exactly how much his life was about to change. "Yeah, she's really something special," I replied, which was technically true, just not in the way he thought I meant it. And then Victor made his grand entrance, because the man couldn't just arrive somewhere. He had to make an event out of it. Lamborghini purring like a mechanical cat, custom suit that probably cost more than most people's annual salary, and that particular aura of entitlement that comes from having enough money to believe that normal rules don't apply to you. He stepped out of his car like he was walking a red carpet, immediately drawing the attention of everyone in the vicinity. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced to no one in particular, "the future of fitness and health awareness has arrived." Because apparently humility was another thing he couldn't afford despite his considerable wealth. Victor spent the next 30 minutes glad-handing everyone in sight, taking photos with community leaders who'd shown up for the event, and generally acting like he'd personally invented the concept of preventive healthcare. He kept one arm around Celeste whenever possible, and I had to admire his balls, openly claiming my wife in front of me while I was standing right there. It takes a special kind of arrogance to be that blatant about your affairs. But the real performance art began when the actual testing started. Dean was first up, naturally, stripping down to his underwear for body composition analysis while flexing for the cameras that Celeste was using to document everything. "Gotta show people that fitness isn't just about looking good," he said, while absolutely showing off how good he looked. "It's about being healthy inside and out." Tyler was next, joking with the medical technicians about how his high-stress trading lifestyle probably meant he needed to pay extra attention to his cardiovascular health. "Money's no good if you're not alive to spend it," he quipped, which would have been funnier if he weren't actively contributing to my stress levels by sleeping with my wife. Malik treated his screening like a business networking opportunity, chatting up everyone in Scrubs about potential real estate investments in the medical field. "Healthcare real estate is the future," he kept saying. Always going to be demand, always going to be profits. It's recession-proof. And Victor? Victor turned his entire screening into a photo opportunity, making sure every angle was captured for future marketing materials. This is what leadership looks like, he announced to Celeste's camera. A CEO who doesn't just talk about employee wellness, but demonstrates it personally. Meanwhile, I moved through the background like a ghost, wiping down equipment, restocking supplies, and making sure everything ran smoothly. The invisible man doing invisible work while the stars of the show preened and posed for their audience. No one paid attention to the janitor making sure their precious event didn't fall apart, which was exactly how I wanted it. Because while they were busy performing for the cameras and stroking their own egos, I was watching every detail, noting every interaction, and making sure that everything went exactly according to the plan that none of them knew existed. The best part? They were having so much fun, so convinced of their own brilliance and importance, that they had no idea they were participating in their own downfall. It was beautiful to watch. You know that moment in a disaster movie when everything seems fine, people are going about their business, and then suddenly the ground starts shaking? That's exactly what the next 72 hours felt like, except instead of earthquakes or alien invasions, it was watching 5 people's lives implode in real time while I maintained the perfect poker face of a concerned, supportive husband. The results started rolling in on Thursday morning, exactly 48 hours after the screenings. Tamara had done her job with the precision of a Swiss watchmaker, and the medical lab she'd partnered with was as legitimate as they come. Everything was completely by the book, professionally handled, and absolutely devastating in its implications. Dean was the first domino to fall, which was poetic justice considering he'd been the first to volunteer for testing. His phone rang at 8:47 a.m. while he was in the middle of leading a CrossFit class, barking orders at a group of soccer moms who were paying premium prices to be yelled at while lifting heavy objects. I know the exact time because I happened to be in the gym, doing my usual maintenance work on the equipment, when his entire world came crashing down. This can't be right, he said into his phone, his voice carrying across the gym with the kind of panic that makes everyone stop what they're doing. There has to be some kind of mistake. I'm healthy. I eat clean. I work out 6 days a week. I take supplements worth more than most people's grocery budgets. The class he'd been teaching just stood there holding their kettlebells, watching their supposedly invincible trainer turn the color of week-old lettuce. Dean kept pacing around in circles, running his free hand through his perfectly styled hair while repeating variations of "this can't be happening," like a broken record stuck on the world's worst song. "I need to come in immediately," he finally managed. "Can we run the tests again? Maybe there was contamination, or a mix-up, or..." His voice trailed off as whatever the person on the other end was telling him apparently confirmed his worst fears. By the time Dean hung up, half his morning class had already gathered their stuff and left. Nothing kills the motivation for a workout quite like watching your trainer have what appears to be a medical emergency in real time. The remaining soccer moms were whispering among themselves, probably wondering if whatever Dean had was contagious and whether they should demand refunds. Tyler got his call about an hour later, while he was in the middle of a live-stream trading session from his downtown loft. I wasn't there to witness it personally, but thanks to the magic of social media and Tyler's habit of broadcasting his entire life online, I got to watch the whole meltdown from the comfort of my own home. One minute he was explaining cryptocurrency market trends to his audience with his usual cocky confidence, gesturing at multiple monitors displaying charts that looked like modern art created by caffeinated spiders. The next minute, his phone rang, and his face went from master of the universe to deer caught in headlights, faster than a Tesla in ludicrous mode. "I'm sorry, folks," he stammered to his camera, his usual smooth delivery replaced by the verbal equivalent of a car with engine trouble. I have to end the stream early today." But Tyler being Tyler, he forgot to actually end the stream. So his audience got to watch him pace around his apartment, pale and sweating, having what sounded like the exact same conversation Dean had earlier. The chat was going crazy with speculation. Everything from Tyler's having a breakdown, to "this is viral marketing for a new crypto coin," to "someone call 911, he looks like he's dying." By the time Tyler remembered he was still broadcasting and cut the feed, Clips of his meltdown were already making their way around crypto Twitter with hashtags like #TylerDown and #CryptoMeltdown. The internet moves fast when there's drama to be consumed. Malik's world started crumbling around noon, right in the middle of what was supposed to be a high-stakes real estate closing. He was at some upscale law office downtown, probably wearing a suit that cost more than most people's cars, when his phone buzzed with the call that would change everything. I found out about this one secondhand through the Real Estate Gossip Network, which moves faster than CNN breaking news when there's juicy drama to share. Apparently, Malik excused himself from the conference room to take what he thought would be a quick call, only to return looking like he'd seen his own ghost. "Gentlemen, I apologize," he reportedly told the room full of lawyers, investors, and other real estate vultures. "There's been a family emergency. We'll need to reschedule." Except there was no family emergency, unless you count Malik's life falling apart as a family crisis, which I suppose it technically was. The deal he walked away from was worth 7 figures, and in the real estate world, you don't walk away from 7-figure deals unless someone's literally dying or you're about to be arrested. Victor's call came last, at 2:30 p.m., while he was in the middle of a board meeting at Apex Fitness headquarters. This I know because Celeste was there for some kind of brand ambassador photo shoot, and she came home that evening with all the details, completely oblivious to the bigger picture she was painting. "It was so weird," she told me over dinner, picking at a salad that probably cost more than most people spend on groceries in a week. Victor was in this really important meeting with investors, talking about expansion plans and new franchise opportunities, when his assistant interrupted with some urgent phone call. According to Celeste, Victor tried to play it cool at first, taking the call in his office while the board waited. But whatever he heard on that call hit him like a freight train carrying bad news and personal regret. He came back into the meeting looking absolutely terrible, Celeste continued, completely missing the irony of her choice of words. Pale, sweaty, like he'd seen a ghost or something. He tried to laugh it off, made some joke about needing to pay better attention to his health, but you could tell something was really wrong. The meeting apparently ended early, with Victor making excuses about feeling under the weather and needing to reschedule. The investors left looking confused and probably concerned about their money, while Victor locked himself in his office for the rest of the day. But here's where it gets really interesting. Within hours of getting their individual calls, all 4 of them started experiencing what they described as matching symptoms. Weakness, fever, cold sweats. The kind of physical manifestations that happen when your brain starts believing your body is in serious trouble. It's amazing how powerful the mind-body connection can be when you give it something concrete to worry about. Tell someone they might have a serious health problem, and suddenly every minor ache becomes a potential symptom. Every moment of fatigue becomes evidence of impending doom. By Thursday evening, Dean had closed his gym early, claiming he felt too sick to work. Tyler had canceled all his trading activities and social media appearances. Malik had postponed 3 property showings and a networking event. And Victor had delegated all his meetings to subordinates while he dealt with a personal health matter. The beautiful part was watching them try to reach each other, probably wanting to compare notes or seek reassurance, while simultaneously being too proud or scared to admit what was happening. It was like watching a game of telephone played by people who were all too terrified to actually pick up the phone. And through it all, I maintained my role as the concerned, supportive husband, offering to help Celeste deal with the stress of seeing her friends and business associates going through health scares. The dominoes were falling exactly as planned. There's something deeply satisfying about hospital waiting rooms when you're not the one waiting for bad news. It's like watching a really intense drama unfold in real time. Except instead of Netflix, you're getting front row seats to karma finally cashing some overdue checks. And brother, Friday afternoon at Stark Memorial Hospital was better than any streaming service could ever hope to be. By noon, all 5 of them had collapsed under what their panicked minds had convinced them were life-threatening symptoms. It started with Dean, who'd apparently fainted during what was supposed to be a private training session with one of his wealthier clients. Nothing says professional fitness expert quite like face-planting in front of someone who pays you $300 an hour to tell them how to lift things properly. Tyler was next, collapsing in his downtown loft while frantically Googling his symptoms and probably wondering if his crypto portfolio would survive without him. His neighbor found him hyperventilating on his balcony, convinced he was having some kind of cardiac event. The irony of a guy who spent his days analyzing market volatility being completely unable to handle his own personal crash was not lost on me. Malik's breakdown happened at a Starbucks of all places, which seemed fitting for someone whose entire personality was built around overpriced lifestyle choices. He'd been meeting with a potential client about some high-end property development when he suddenly turned gray and started sweating like he was in a sauna. The client probably thought it was the worst sales pitch in real estate history. Victor, being Victor, managed to make even his collapse dramatic. He was in his office at Apex Fitness, probably staring at himself in one of the many mirrors he'd installed to fuel his narcissism, when he decided he needed immediate medical attention. Instead of calling 911 like a normal person, he had his assistant arrange for a private ambulance because even medical emergencies needed to maintain his image of wealth and importance. And Celeste? My darling wife had worked herself into such a state of sympathetic panic watching her boy toys fall apart that she convinced herself she was experiencing symptoms too. I feel feverish, she kept telling me, despite the thermometer showing a perfectly normal temperature. And weak. And my heart's racing. What if we all caught something at the health screening? What if the equipment wasn't properly sterilized? I played my role perfectly, the concerned husband driving his worried wife to the hospital to get checked out just to be safe. Because that's what supportive spouses do, right? They drop everything to rush their partners to medical facilities when they're convinced they're dying from mysterious illnesses. The emergency room at Stark Memorial was like a reunion from hell when we arrived. Dean was already there, sitting in a wheelchair looking like he'd aged 10 years in 2 days. Tyler was pacing back and forth, still pale, but animated enough to be scrolling through his phone, probably checking crypto prices out of habit. Malik was slumped in a corner chair, having what appeared to be a very heated phone conversation with someone about rescheduling his entire week. And Victor? Victor was holding court in the middle of the waiting area, talking loudly to anyone who would listen about how he needed the best doctors available, and how money was no object when it came to his health. Because even in a hospital gown, the man couldn't resist trying to establish his superiority over everyone around him. The sight should have broken me. These were people I'd trusted, people I'd considered family, people who'd been part of my life for years. Seeing them scared and vulnerable should have triggered some kind of sympathy response, some residual affection from the relationships we'd once had. Instead, it steadied me like a shot of premium whiskey on a cold day. They looked at each other with a mixture of fear and confusion, probably wondering if this was some kind of cosmic coincidence or if they'd all been exposed to something during the health screening. None of them seemed to suspect that their mysterious illness might be connected to their shared hobby of screwing the same man's wife. The really beautiful part was watching them try to avoid making eye contact with me. Dean kept looking at his shoes like they contained the secrets of the universe. Tyler was suddenly fascinated by whatever was happening on his phone screen. Malik had developed an intense interest in the motivational posters on the hospital walls. And Victor kept checking his expensive watch as if time itself could rescue him from this situation. Only Celeste seemed genuinely confused about why everyone was acting so weird. "Why is everyone being so quiet?" she whispered to me, apparently oblivious to the elephant herd that had taken up residence in the waiting room. "We're all here because we're worried about our health. Shouldn't we be supporting each other? Supporting each other. Right. Because nothing says mutual support quite like a group of men who've been secretly coordinating their affairs with the same woman while mocking her husband in group chats. The tension in that waiting room was thicker than the plot of a soap opera written by someone on a 3-day caffeine bender. You could practically see the guilt radiating off them like heat waves, mixing with their genuine fear about what the doctors were going to tell them. Dr. Patricia Harrison arrived about 20 minutes later, looking like the kind of medical professional who'd seen every possible form of human stupidity and wasn't impressed by any of it. She was carrying a stack of files that I knew contained the test results that would either confirm their worst fears or provide some relief from the psychological torture they'd been putting themselves through. "I need to speak with all of you," she announced, her voice carrying the kind of authority that made everyone in the waiting room sit up straighter. "About your test results from the health screening." The silence that followed was so complete you could have heard a pin drop in the next county. 5 people holding their breath, waiting to hear whether their lives were about to change forever, while I sat there in my maintenance uniform, still playing the role of the invisible husband who just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Dr. Harrison looked around the room, making eye contact with each of them in turn. I have to say, this is unusual. In 20 years of practicing medicine, I've never seen results quite like these from a group screening. Dean's hands were shaking. Tyler had gone completely pale. Malik was gripping the arms of his chair like he was trying to prevent himself from floating away. Victor was trying to maintain his usual confident demeanor, but I could see the cracks forming in his facade. And Celeste? She reached over and grabbed my hand, seeking comfort from the husband she'd been betraying for months, completely unaware that I was the architect of this entire situation. Guys, Dr. Harrison continued, her voice taking on the kind of serious tone that medical professionals use when they're about to deliver news that will change everything. This is hard to say, but your results are serious. We need to contact all your partners immediately. The silence that followed was louder than thunder, more deafening than a rock concert, more complete than the vacuum of space. It was the sound of 5 people realizing that their secret world of betrayal and deception was about to become very, very public. None of them dared look at me. You know how they say revenge is a dish best served cold? Well, I discovered that public humiliation is like a 5-course meal served at absolute zero, and I was about to become the chef of the century. The hospital revelation was just the appetizer. The real feast was about to begin, and every single course was going to be more devastating than the last. See, here's the thing about living in the digital age. Privacy is basically a myth, especially when you're dealing with people whose entire identities are built around their public image. These idiots had spent years crafting their online personas, building their brands, cultivating their reputations like precious little gardens of narcissism, which meant they had a lot further to fall when gravity finally decided to do its job. The beauty of my plan wasn't that I had to destroy them. They'd done most of the heavy lifting themselves with their group chats, their documented affairs, and their complete lack of discretion. All I had to do was give their existing stupidity a little push toward the spotlight, and let human nature handle the rest. Phase 1 started with health blogs. Nothing gets people's attention quite like the suggestion that there might be a possible outbreak brewing, especially when it involves recognizable local figures. I didn't have to lie or exaggerate. I just had to plant the seeds and let people's imaginations run wild with the possibilities. I started with fitchicago.com, a popular local wellness blog that covered everything from new gym openings to nutrition trends. An anonymous tip about concerning health screening results from a recent awareness campaign was all it took to get their attention. Within hours, they'd published a carefully worded article about potential health concerns arising from a local fitness event, complete with enough vague details to make people start connecting dots. The article didn't name names. They were too smart for that, but it included enough specifics about the screening location, the timing, and the prominent local fitness personalities involved that anyone with half a brain could figure out who they were talking about. It was like a puzzle that solved itself, and the internet loves nothing more than a good mystery that makes them feel clever for solving it. From there, the whispers spread through Chicago's interconnected social media ecosystem like wildfire in a dry forest. Fitness influencers started sharing the article with cryptic captions about being careful who you trust and the importance of regular testing. Local gossip accounts picked up the thread, adding their own speculation about which prominent figures might be involved. Dean's gym empire started crumbling first, which made sense considering his entire business model was built around people trusting him with their physical well-being. When you're in the fitness industry, any suggestion of health problems is basically professional suicide. His morning classes went from packed to empty overnight, with members suddenly discovering urgent reasons why they needed to cancel their memberships. The cancellations started trickling in on Saturday, then became a flood by Monday. His premium personal training clients, the ones paying $300 an hour for the privilege of being yelled at by someone with perfect abs, were suddenly too busy to schedule sessions. Corporate wellness contracts that had taken months to negotiate were being reviewed by legal departments who'd gotten nervous about liability issues. By Wednesday, CrossFit Revolution looked like a ghost town with expensive equipment. Dean was hemorrhaging money faster than a hedge fund during a market crash, watching his carefully built fitness empire dissolve because people were suddenly very concerned about what they might catch at his gym. Tyler's crypto empire faced a different kind of collapse, but it was equally spectacular. In the trading world, confidence is everything, and confidence is exactly what Tyler lost when his clients started questioning whether they wanted their financial advisor to be someone who might be dealing with mysterious health issues. Because if you can't manage your own physical well-being, how can you be trusted to manage other people's money? His live streaming audience started dropping off as rumors circulated about his erratic behavior and concerning health problems. Crypto Twitter, which had once hung on his every market prediction, suddenly found his analysis less compelling when it was coming from someone who might be facing serious medical issues. Investment clients began pulling their funds, citing concerns about advisor stability and risk management protocols. The beautiful irony was that Tyler's own obsession with documenting his life on social media had provided all the evidence people needed to fuel the speculation. Screenshots of his panicked livestream meltdown were circulating with captions like, "This you, bro?" and "Maybe stick to trading medical stocks instead." Malik's real estate empire faced the most brutal collapse because his entire business was built on personal relationships and trust. In real estate, your reputation is your currency, and Malik's reputation was getting shredded faster than documents at Enron headquarters. Property developers who'd once competed for his attention were suddenly taking his calls less frequently. Potential buyers started choosing different agents, citing concerns about recent developments and wanting to work with someone more stable. The seven-figure deal he'd walked away from? Word had gotten out about that, and in the real estate world, walking away from major deals without explanation is the kind of behavior that makes people question your judgment, your finances, and your overall stability. Other agents started circulating stories about Malik's unprofessional behavior and questionable decision-making. His carefully cultivated image as the smooth-talking, always successful property mogul was being replaced by whispers about health problems, poor judgment, and possible financial difficulties. In an industry where perception is reality, Malik was watching his entire career circle the drain in real time. But Victor faced the most spectacular destruction because he had the furthest to fall. Apex Fitness wasn't just his company. It was a publicly traded corporation with shareholders, board members, and investors who got very nervous when their CEO became the subject of health-related speculation. The stock price started dropping on Tuesday when the first health blog articles appeared. By Thursday, financial news outlets were reporting on uncertainty surrounding Apex Fitness leadership and investor concerns about executive health disclosures. The company's social media accounts, which had once featured Victor prominently in their marketing, suddenly seemed to be scrubbing his image from their content. Board members were asking uncomfortable questions about whether Victor had disclosed any health issues that might affect his ability to lead the company. Investors were wondering if they should be concerned about the long-term stability of their investment. Corporate partners were reviewing their relationships with Apex Fitness, using the kind of corporate speak that translates to, "We're looking for reasons to distance ourselves from this potential disaster." And then there was Ashley North, Celeste's biggest rival in the influencer world, who smelled blood in the water and moved in for the kill with the precision of a social media shark. Ashley had been waiting for years for an opportunity to take down her competition, and the health screening scandal was like Christmas morning wrapped in a birthday present and delivered by unicorns. Her exposé video, titled "Fake Influencer, Fake Authenticity: The Truth About Celeste Harland," was a masterpiece of social media destruction. 23 minutes of carefully researched content that connected all the dots between the health screening, the mysterious illness, and what Ashley had somehow discovered about Celeste's relationship with multiple prominent local figures. The video went viral faster than a pandemic, racking up hundreds of thousands of views in the first 24 hours. Comments sections exploded with speculation, screenshots, and the kind of gleeful destruction that only the internet can provide. Brands that had once competed for Celeste's endorsement were suddenly sending termination emails, citing brand safety concerns and alignment with company values. Her follower count plummeted as people unfollowed in droves, many leaving comments about being disgusted and betrayed by someone they'd trusted for lifestyle advice. Sponsored posts were being deleted, collaboration offers were being rescinded, and her carefully built influencer empire was collapsing faster than a house of cards in a hurricane. The best part? I didn't have to do anything except watch. They'd created the perfect storm for their own destruction, and all I'd done was give it a gentle push in the right direction. There's a special kind of satisfaction that comes from watching someone try to screw you over, only to discover they've actually screwed themselves. It's like watching a magician attempt a disappearing act and accidentally making their own career vanish instead. And when Celeste walked into that divorce attorney's office thinking she was about to pull the con of the century, she had no idea she was actually stepping into a trap I'd been building for years. The divorce papers arrived on a Tuesday morning in late May, delivered by some kid who probably made minimum wage plus mileage to ruin people's days professionally. Celeste had been staying at her sister's place since the whole health screening scandal exploded, probably plotting what she thought would be her brilliant escape strategy. The papers were thick, official-looking, and absolutely dripping with the kind of legal arrogance that comes from lawyers who charge by the syllable. Her attorney was Marcus Webb, one of those sharks who advertises on late-night TV with commercials that basically say, "Going through a divorce? Let us help you destroy your spouse's life while we get rich." Webb had a reputation for being ruthless, expensive, and exactly the kind of guy you'd hire if you wanted to squeeze every possible penny out of a marriage before setting it on fire. The petition was a work of fiction that would have made Stephen King jealous. According to Celeste's version of our marriage, I was an emotionally distant husband who had failed to provide adequate financial support, while she contributed significantly to the household through her successful business ventures. Her successful business ventures. Right. Because posting thirst traps on Instagram while sleeping with half of Chicago's male population is apparently the modern equivalent of building a Fortune 500 company. But here's where it gets really entertaining. Celeste and her lawyer had done their homework, or at least they thought they had. They knew I worked for the city sanitation department, they knew my official salary, and they probably calculated exactly how much alimony they could squeeze out of me based on those numbers. What they didn't know was that their research was about as thorough as a middle school book report written 5 minutes before class. See, the beautiful thing about building wealth quietly is that when people think they know everything about your finances, they usually know absolutely nothing. Celeste had spent 6 years married to me without ever bothering to dig deeper than my paycheck stubs and W-2 forms. She had no idea about the crypto portfolio that had grown from a few $1,000s into something that would make most divorce attorneys weep tears of pure joy. But here's the kicker, and this is where years of strategic planning finally paid off. Every single one of those crypto investments predated our marriage. Every Bitcoin purchase, every Ethereum transaction, every altcoin gamble I'd made was documented with timestamps that showed I'd acquired them months or even years before Celeste, and I said, I do. In divorce law, there's this beautiful concept called separate property, assets that belong to one spouse individually rather than being part of the marital estate. And thanks to my obsessive record-keeping and conservative approach to financial planning, my crypto fortune was about as separate as property could get. The first hint that Celeste's grand plan might have some flaws came when I showed up to the initial divorce proceedings with Eva Darnell as my attorney. Eva wasn't just any lawyer. She was the lawyer, the kind of legal predator who made other divorce attorneys wake up in cold sweats. She'd built her reputation by dismantling the cases of overconfident spouses who thought they could outsmart the system. Eva was a woman who looked like she could have been a librarian, complete with sensible shoes and reading glasses, but fought like a cage fighter who'd been raised by wolves and trained by Navy SEALs. She had this way of speaking very quietly that made everyone in the room lean forward to hear her. And then she'd deliver legal haymakers that left opposing counsel wondering what the hell had just happened. When Eva walked into that conference room carrying 3 bankers' boxes full of documentation, I could see Webb's confidence start to crack like cheap paint in the sun. Celeste was sitting next to him looking smug and satisfied, probably imagining all the ways she was going to spend my money once the divorce was finalized. Before we begin, Eva said in that deceptively soft voice of hers, I think there are some financial disclosures that might affect the proceedings. She opened the first box and started laying out documents like she was dealing cards in the world's most expensive poker game. Cryptocurrency exchange records, blockchain transaction histories, wallet addresses, tax documentation going back 8 years, a complete financial archaeology of my digital investments. Webb's face went through about 6 different expressions in the span of 30 seconds, starting with confusion and ending somewhere around, "Oh shit, we fucked up big time." Celeste just looked confused, probably wondering why anyone would need that much paperwork to discuss a garbage man's finances. "As you can see," Eva continued, still using that librarian voice that somehow made everything sound more ominous, "Mr. Harland has been quite successful with his cryptocurrency investments. Investments that, as the timestamps clearly show, were initiated and maintained entirely prior to the marriage." The number Eva wrote on the whiteboard for $2 million hit that conference room like a financial asteroid. Webb actually choked on his coffee, which would have been funny if I weren't too busy enjoying the look of absolute shock on Celeste's face. For the first time in our entire relationship, my wife was completely speechless. Her mouth was hanging open like she was trying to catch flies, and her eyes had gone wide enough to use as satellite dishes. The woman who'd spent months calling me impotent and mocking me as the furniture husband was suddenly realizing that the furniture was worth more than everything she'd ever owned combined. "This has to be a mistake," Webb stammered, rifling through his own paperwork like he might find some magic document that would make my crypto fortune disappear. "Our investigation showed that Mr. Harland works in sanitation and earns approximately $55,000 annually." "Mr. Harland does indeed work in sanitation," Eva replied, pulling out more documentation. "He also happens to be a rather astute investor who had the foresight to diversify his portfolio into digital assets before they became mainstream. Assets that, as separate property, will not be subject to division in these proceedings." The rest of the meeting was like watching someone try to fight their way out of quicksand. Webb kept grasping for legal strategies that might give Celeste some claim to my crypto wealth, while Eva systematically destroyed each argument with the precision of a surgeon removing cancerous tissue. Community property? Nope. All acquired before marriage. Marital contributions to growth? Nice try. All gains were from market appreciation and my individual trading decisions. Commingling of assets? Not even close. I kept everything completely separate. But Eva wasn't done. The second box contained documentation of Celeste's own financial situation, and it painted a picture that was about as pretty as a dumpster fire in a sewage treatment plant. Credit card debt, unpaid business expenses, tax liabilities from her influencer income. Turns out my successful businesswoman wife was actually drowning in debt she'd been hiding from me. Additionally, Eva said, pulling out the final stack of papers, "There's the matter of Ms. Harland's recent loss of income due to her terminated brand partnerships and canceled sponsorship agreements. Given her current financial obligations and lack of steady employment, she may actually owe Mr. Harland spousal support rather than the other way around." The silence in that room was so complete you could have heard a pin drop in another zip code. Celeste looked like she'd been hit by a truck carrying bad news and driven by karma itself. Webb was staring at his paperwork like it might spontaneously combust and save him from this professional embarrassment. When we finally walked out of that conference room, Celeste's grand plan had been reduced to ash, and her lawyer looked like he wanted to find a new career in something less stressful, like bomb disposal or lion taming. The final divorce decree was signed 6 weeks later. Celeste walked away with exactly what she'd brought into the marriage, which, as it turned out, was a whole lot of debt and a rapidly declining social media presence. Justice, as it turned out, had a sense of humor after all. You know that feeling when you finally take off shoes that have been pinching your feet all day? That moment when the pressure releases and you realize you'd forgotten what comfort actually felt like? That's exactly what freedom tasted like 6 months after the divorce was finalized, sitting in my new downtown loft, watching the Chicago skyline light up like a circuit board against the October evening sky. The apartment was everything my old life wasn't. Clean lines, modern furniture, and absolutely zero traces of the man I used to be. No more hiding in plain sight. No more pretending to be less than I was. No more swallowing my pride, while people I trusted stuck knives in my back. The place screamed success in a way that was subtle but unmistakable, like a Rolex that doesn't need to show off because everyone already knows what it is. My phone had been buzzing nonstop for weeks with messages from Celeste. The notifications had become like background noise, a constant reminder of how completely the tables had turned. Each message was more desperate than the last, evolving from angry demands to pathetic pleas like some kind of reverse character development arc. Michael, we need to talk. This is ridiculous. You can't just ignore me forever. We were married for 6 years. I know I made mistakes, but this is crazy. Call me back. Please. I'm sorry. I need you. Michael, please. I'm really struggling here. I just need someone to talk to. I don't know what to do. Everything's falling apart. Please just call me. Each message got a one-way ticket to digital hell, deleted faster than a crypto scam coin disappearing from someone's wallet. There's something deeply satisfying about having the power to make someone's desperate attempts at communication simply vanish into the void. For years, I'd been the one reaching out, trying to connect, attempting to save a marriage that was already dead in the water. Now the roles were reversed, and I was discovering that ignoring someone can be its own form of poetry. The beautiful thing about karma is that it doesn't need your help once it gets rolling. Dean's gym had closed permanently in September, unable to recover from the mass exodus of members and the mountain of debt he'd accumulated trying to keep the doors open. Last I heard, he was working at a chain fitness center in the suburbs, probably making about as much per hour as a decent barista. From bro, I'm building an empire, to, would you like to upgrade your membership to include towel service? In less than 6 months. Tyler's crypto empire had imploded so spectacularly that it became a cautionary tale in trading circles. His YouTube channel, which once had hundreds of thousands of subscribers hanging on his every market prediction, was now a digital ghost town with comments disabled and upload schedules that had become more irregular than Chicago weather. Word through the grapevine was that he'd moved back in with his parents, probably explaining to his mother why her basement was suddenly full of expensive computer equipment and crushed dreams. Malik's real estate career had cratered harder than the housing market in 2008. The man who used to flip properties like pancakes was now working for someone else's agency, probably showing studio apartments to college kids and pretending he wasn't dying inside every time he had to explain why the kitchen was also the bedroom and the bathroom. His Tesla had been repossessed, his designer wardrobe had probably been sold on eBay, and his Instagram account had gone from lifestyle inspiration to cautionary tale. Victor's fall had been the most spectacular, partly because he'd had the furthest to drop and partly because corporate destruction always happens in slow motion, giving you time to really savor each devastating detail. Apex Fitness stock had tanked so hard that the company became a business school case study in how CEO scandals can destroy shareholder value. The board had forced him out in a move they described as pursuing new leadership direction, which in corporate speak translates to, we're throwing this guy under the bus and backing up to make sure we got him. Last I'd heard, Victor was driving for one of those luxury rideshare services, probably listening to passengers complain about their jobs while remembering when he used to have people complaining about their jobs to him. There's probably some Greek tragedy-level irony in a former CEO chaffering around the kind of executives he used to network with at country club events. But the most interesting twist in this whole saga came from the last person I'd expected, Ashley North. The influencer who delivered the killing blow to Celeste's career had apparently taken notice of the quiet man in the background who'd somehow emerged from the wreckage not just unscathed, but significantly more interesting than anyone had realized. The dinner invitation had arrived via DM 3 weeks ago, casual, but clearly intentional. Hey Michael, I know this might seem random, but I'd love to take you to dinner sometime. I think we might have more in common than people realize. Ashley North wanting to have dinner with me was like discovering that the popular girl from high school had suddenly developed an interest in the quiet kid who used to fix computers in the library. The irony was delicious. The woman who'd helped destroy my wife's career was now apparently interested in getting to know the husband Celeste had thrown away like yesterday's garbage. Our first dinner had been at some upscale place downtown, the kind of restaurant where the menu doesn't have prices and the waiters speak in hushed tones like they're discussing state secrets. Ashley had shown up looking like she'd stepped off a magazine cover, but the conversation had been surprisingly real, surprisingly deep, surprisingly free of the superficial bullshit that I'd grown to expect from people in her world. You know, she'd said over dessert, I spent months researching Celeste's life for that expose, and the more I learned about you, the more I wondered how someone that smart had stayed invisible for so long. Smart. Not impotent, not weak, not furniture. Smart. It was like hearing a foreign language that I'd forgotten I could speak. We'd had 3 more dinners since then, each one feeling less like 2 people getting to know each other and more like 2 people recognizing something they'd been missing without realizing it. Ashley was sharp, funny, and refreshingly honest about the fact that her interest in me had started as curiosity about the mystery man behind the scandal and evolved into something that felt a lot more real than anything I'd experienced in years. Tonight was dinner number 5, at a place Ashley had picked specifically because it was somewhere we can actually talk without people trying to eavesdrop for gossip content. The woman understood the value of privacy, which was something I'd learned to appreciate in ways I never thought I would. As I got ready to leave the apartment, I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror and had to do a double take. The man looking back at me wasn't the invisible husband, the quiet janitor, or the guy people called impotent behind his back. It was someone who looked confident, successful, and completely comfortable in his own skin. The transformation hadn't happened overnight. It had been building for months, layer by layer, like sediment forming rock under pressure. Each deleted message from Celeste, each news update about my former friends continued downward spirals. Each conversation with Ashley that felt like connecting with an actual human being instead of performing for an audience. All of it had contributed to this version of myself that I was still getting used to. Walking out of that apartment, heading to dinner with a woman who was interested in the real me rather than some fantasy version she'd constructed, I realized that revenge hadn't been about destruction at all. It had been about truth. About forcing people to face the consequences of their choices. About refusing to be invisible anymore. About finally becoming the person I'd always been underneath all the loyalty and patience and quiet endurance. They destroyed themselves. I'd just handed them the mirror to see what they'd become. And for the first time in years, I was looking forward to what came next. My wife told her friends I'm obsessed with her because I asked her not to flirt with guys at parties. Then she made out with her ex right in front of me, as a joke, while her friends filmed and chanted he deserved it. When I walked out, she posted stories dancing on random guys with captions like, "This is what happens when you try to control me," then showed up wasted at 3 a.m. saying, "Every girl cheats. At least I did it to your face." Today at noon, my phone exploded with 20+ panicked voice messages from her. "Don't do this. Please, answer me." You know that moment when your gut starts screaming at you, but your brain keeps telling it to shut the hell up? Yeah, that was me in September. My wife Marissa had perfected this neat little trick where every legitimate concern I had about our relationship magically transformed into comedy gold for her girlfriends. It was like watching a magician, except instead of pulling rabbits out of hats, she was pulling jokes out of my genuine worries about us. It started small, the way cancer does. I'd ask her not to flirt with random dudes at parties. You know, basic married person etiquette, and she'd tilt her head with this patronizing little smile. "Babe, you're being ridiculous," she'd say, like I'd just suggested we start keeping pet dinosaurs. Then came the phone calls to her inner circle, Tina, Grace, and Leah. The holy trinity of enabling bullshit. "Oh my God, girls, you won't believe what he said now." I'd hear her whisper into her phone, usually while I was in the next room trying to pretend I wasn't listening. "He thinks I was flirting with the bartender. Can you believe it? I literally just said thank you when the guy complimented my dress." Right. Because accepting compliments from strange men while batting your eyelashes is totally normal married behavior. But what do I know? I'm just the obsessed husband, apparently. The whispers started following me everywhere. At dinner parties, I'd catch snippets of conversation that would make my stomach drop. "Clingy much?" Grace would snort, loud enough for me to hear. "Poor Marissa, having to deal with that level of jealousy," Tina would add, shaking her head like she was discussing a terminal illness. Leah was the worst, though. She had this way of looking at me like I was a wounded animal at the zoo. All pity and disgust rolled into one nauseating expression. "You know, some men are just naturally insecure," she'd say to Marissa, again, just loud enough for me to catch it. "It's not their fault they can't handle strong, independent women." Strong and independent. That's what they called it when your wife I fucked the waiter right in front of you. At first, I tried to convince myself I was losing my mind. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe I was one of those psycho husbands you see in movies who checks their wife's phone and follows them to work. The thought made me sick, So I'd swallow my concerns and pretend everything was fine. After all, if 3 of her closest friends thought I was being unreasonable, maybe I was the problem. But here's the thing about gaslighting. It only works if you let it. And somewhere between the 5th, you're being dramatic, and the 10th eye roll when I brought up her behavior, I started keeping mental notes. Not in a creepy way, just observational. Like a scientist studying a particularly toxic species of snake. The pattern became crystal clear. Every time I'd voice a legitimate concern about boundaries or respect, Marissa would flip the script faster than a politician during election season. Suddenly, I wasn't a husband asking for basic courtesy. I was an obsessed, controlling maniac who couldn't handle his wife having friends. He follows me around the house. She'd joke to her friends during their weekly wine nights. I could hear them cackling from the kitchen while I was literally just getting a glass of water. I can't even go to the bathroom without him asking where I'm going. Newsflash, honey. Asking, where are you headed? When someone grabs their purse and heads for the door isn't stalking. It's called basic human communication. You know, that thing normal couples do. My coworker Aaron tried to warn me about 3 months into this nightmare. We were grabbing lunch at this dingy sandwich shop near the office, and I must have looked like I'd been hit by a truck because he put down his pastrami and gave me this look. Dude, you look like hell, he said, not bothering to sugarcoat it. Aaron was one of those straight shooter types who'd tell you if your breath smelled like a garbage disposal. What's going on? I found myself spilling the whole mess. The parties, the flirting, the constant accusations that I was being paranoid. Aaron listened without interrupting, which should have been my first clue that this conversation was going to end with some hard truths. Man, he said when I finished, shaking his head. Don't ignore red flags just because you love her. At the time, I thought he was being dramatic. Love conquers all, right? That's what the movies tell you. What they don't mention is that love also makes you blind, deaf, and dumb to obvious warning signs that your partner is slowly eroding your sanity one joke at a time. The worst part wasn't even the flirting or the boundary crossing. It was the way she'd made me question my own reality. I'd catch her texting someone at midnight, phone tilted away from me, and when I'd ask about it, she'd laugh. There goes my paranoid husband again. Can't a girl have private conversations? Sure, she could. But when those private conversations happened daily, usually with guys I didn't know, and always with that secretive little smirk on her face, forgive me for thinking something was fishy. The final straw in September came at Tina's housewarming party. I watched Marissa collect phone numbers from 3 different guys, each time with this elaborate performance about how networking was important for her career. Right. Because exchanging contacts with Brad the bartender was definitely going to advance her marketing career. When I suggested maybe we could head home, it was past midnight and I had work the next day. She practically rolled her eyes into orbit. See what I mean? She announced to the group. Obsessed with controlling my social life. The crowd ate it up. A few guys actually laughed and patted me on the shoulder like I was some kind of joke. Let the lady have fun, man, one of them said. You've got to trust your wife. Trust. That word had become a weapon in her arsenal. Anytime I questioned anything, it wasn't about respect or boundaries. It was about trust. And apparently, I didn't have enough of it. That night, driving home in dead silence, I finally understood what Aaron meant. These weren't red flags anymore. They were giant crimson billboards with flashing neon lights spelling out danger in letters visible from space. But I was too busy trying to be the perfect, understanding husband to pay attention to the obvious. The obsessed husband joke had become her get-out-of-jail-free card for any behavior that crossed the line. Flirting with strangers? I was obsessed. Setting boundaries? I was controlling. Asking for basic respect? I was insecure. It was genius, really. She'd created this perfect little ecosystem where she could do whatever she wanted, and any objection from me just proved her point about how unreasonable I was. Her friends reinforced it, her family believed it, and even some of my own friends started giving me those concerned looks that said, maybe you should chill out, man. But here's what nobody tells you about being slowly driven insane by someone who's supposed to love you. There comes a moment when the fog lifts, just for a second, and you see the situation with brutal clarity. For me, that moment came when I realized I'd started apologizing for having feelings about my wife's behavior. Sorry I got upset when you gave that guy your number. Sorry I'm not comfortable with you staying out until 3 a.m. without telling me where you are. Sorry for being such an obsessed, controlling husband. That's when it hit me. I wasn't obsessed with her. I was obsessed with trying to save a marriage that she'd already checked out of. And while I was busy playing the part of the understanding husband, she was busy playing the part of the victim married to a psycho. September ended with me staring at the ceiling at 2 a.m., listening to her peaceful breathing next to me, wondering when exactly I'd become the villain in my own love story. Aaron's words kept echoing in my head. Don't ignore red flags just because you love her. Well, guess what? I was done ignoring them. Time to start paying attention to what was right in front of me, even if it was going to hurt like hell. Derek's birthday party was supposed to be fun. You know, one of those chill house parties where you drink cheap beer, complain about work, and pretend you're still in your 20s even though your back hurts from sleeping wrong. Instead, it turned into the kind of nightmare that makes you question every life choice you've ever made, starting with saying, "I do," to someone who apparently missed the memo about what marriage means. The house was packed tighter than a subway car during rush hour. Derek had invited half the city, and the other half had showed up uninvited. Music was thumping so loud I could feel it in my chest, and the smell of cheap cologne mixed with cheaper beer filled the air. Classic house party vibes, except for the part where my wife was about to publicly destroy our marriage for entertainment. Marissa looked incredible, of course. She'd spent 2 hours getting ready, which should have been my first warning sign since Derek's idea of formal attire was a clean t-shirt. She was wearing this little black dress that hugged her curves in all the right places, and I'd be lying if I said I wasn't proud walking in with her on my arm. For about 5 minutes, I actually thought we might have a good time. Then Logan walked in. Logan fucking Mitchell. Her ex-boyfriend from college, the guy she dated for 2 years before we met. The same Logan she'd sworn was ancient history and totally irrelevant to our relationship. Yet somehow, this irrelevant piece of ancient history had managed to score an invite to Derek's party, and judging by the way Marissa's entire posture changed when he walked through the door, she'd known he'd be there. "Oh wow, Logan's here," she said, and I swear to God, her voice went up like 3 octaves. Like she was genuinely shocked to see him, as if Derek hadn't probably texted her the guest list a week ago. "Yeah, what a coincidence," I muttered, grabbing a beer from the cooler and trying to ignore the way she was already scanning the room for him. Within 10 minutes, she'd found an excuse to drift in his direction. "I should say hi," she announced. "It would be rude not to, right?" Right. Because rudeness was suddenly a huge concern for the woman who'd spent the last month telling our friends I was obsessed with her. I tried to play it cool, I really did. I hung out by the beer pong table, made small talk with some of Derek's work buddies, even laughed at a few genuinely terrible jokes. But I couldn't help watching her out of the corner of my eye, and what I saw made my stomach turn. She wasn't just saying hi. She was performing, touching his arm when she laughed, leaning in way too close when he talked, playing with her hair in that way she used to do when we were first dating. Every gesture was calculated, deliberate, and designed to send a message. The question was, who was the message for? "Dude, you okay?" Some guy named Mike had sidled up next to me, following my gaze across the room. "You look like you're about to murder someone." "Just peachy," I said, taking a long pull from my beer. "Nothing like watching your wife flirt with her ex at a party." Mike winced. "Ouch. That's rough, man." Meanwhile, Tina, Grace, and Leah had materialized around Marissa like her personal hype squad. They were giggling and whispering, occasionally shooting glances in my direction. I could practically hear their conversation. "Look at him. So jealous. Marissa deserves better. She should totally make him sweat." And then she started touching him. Not accidentally, not casually. Deliberately. Her hand slid down his arm when she laughed at something he said. She pressed against him when someone squeezed past them in the crowded room. Every movement was a declaration of war, and she kept looking at me to make sure I was watching. I was watching, all right. I was watching my wife systematically disrespect our marriage in front of a room full of people, many of whom I'd have to face at future social events. I was watching her turn our relationship into entertainment for her friends. I was watching the woman I'd promised to love and honor treat me like a joke. The crowd around them was getting bigger. Someone had turned the music down slightly, and I could hear them laughing. Derek raised his beer and shouted something about old friends reuniting, which got a cheer from the group. Marissa was eating up the attention, her face flushed with alcohol and the thrill of having an audience. That's when she looked directly at me across the room. Not a glance, not a quick peek, a full-on stare. She held my gaze for what felt like forever, and I saw something cold and calculating in her eyes. This wasn't about Logan. This wasn't about having fun. This was about power. This was about proving she could do whatever she wanted, and I'd just have to take it. She smiled. Actually smiled at me while her hand was still on Logan's chest. And then she kissed him. Not a quick peck, not an accidental brush of lips. A full, deep, passionate kiss that went on for what felt like hours, but was probably only 10 seconds. 10 seconds that destroyed everything I thought I knew about my marriage. 10 seconds that turned me into that guy. The one everyone pities at parties. The one whose wife makes out with other men while he stands there like an idiot. The reaction was immediate. Grace whipped out her phone and started filming. Tina was clapping like she was at a goddamn Broadway show. Leah cupped her hands around her mouth and shouted, "He deserved it," like Marissa had just scored the winning touchdown in the Super Bowl. The crowd erupted. Some people were laughing, others were cheering, and a few looked genuinely uncomfortable but didn't say anything. Because why would they? This was premium drama, the kind of shit people would be talking about for months. Remember Derek's party when Marissa totally destroyed her husband? Epic. I stood there frozen, beer still in my hand, watching my wife pull away from Logan with the biggest smile I'd seen on her face in months. She looked triumphant, vindicated, like she'd just proven some important point about female empowerment or standing up to controlling men. The humiliation hit me like a physical force. It started in my chest and radiated outward until my entire body felt like it was on fire. Every person in that room was looking at me, waiting to see how I'd react. Would I make a scene? Would I storm over there and drag her away? Would I punch Logan in his smug face? Instead, I did something that surprised even me. I set down my beer, walked to the front door, and left. No dramatic exit speech, no confrontation, no begging. I just left. The walk to my car felt like a death march. Each step was heavier than the last, and I could hear the party continuing behind me like nothing had happened. Like my marriage hadn't just been publicly executed for everyone's entertainment. By the time I reached the parking lot, my phone was already buzzing. Text after text, all from Marissa. "Where did you go? Don't be dramatic. Come back inside. You're embarrassing me. It was just a kiss. Stop overreacting. Just a kiss. Right?" Because tongue wrestling your ex-boyfriend at a party while your husband watches is totally normal behavior that I was overreacting to. Then came the phone calls. Ring after ring after ring. I let them all go to voicemail while I sat in my car, staring at the house where my wife was probably explaining to everyone how I was too insecure to handle her friendship with Logan. The final text came 20 minutes later. "Fine. Be childish. But don't expect me to apologize for living my life." Living her life. That's what she called making out with her ex-boyfriend in front of a room full of people. Living her best life, I guess. I drove home in complete silence, my mind replaying the entire scene on an endless loop. The way she'd looked at me before she kissed him. The sound of her friends cheering. The feeling of standing there like a complete fool while my wife publicly humiliated me. But the worst part? The absolute worst fucking part was knowing that when I got home and tried to explain how I felt, she'd find a way to make it my fault. She'd tell me I was being dramatic, that I was reading too much into things, that I was the one with the problem for not being cool with my wife kissing other men. And her friends would back her up, because that's what they did. They enabled her worst behavior and painted me as the villain for not being okay with it. As I pulled into our driveway, I realized Aaron had been right about the red flags. They weren't subtle hints or minor concerns anymore. They were giant, flashing warning signs. And I'd been ignoring them because I didn't want to face the truth about what my marriage had become. The truth was simple and devastating. My wife didn't respect me. Worse than that, she actively enjoyed disrespecting me in front of other people. And the scariest part? I'd been letting her do it for months, convinced that being a good husband meant taking whatever she dished out with a smile. Well, guess what? The smile was officially gone. You'd think humiliating your husband in front of 30 people would be enough for one night. But apparently Marissa was just getting warmed up, because while I was sitting at home, staring at the ceiling and wondering what the hell had happened to my marriage, she was busy documenting her liberation for the entire internet to see. The first Instagram story notification hit my phone around 11 p.m. I almost ignored it. Honestly, I was emotionally drained and just wanted to pretend the whole night hadn't happened. But curiosity is a bitch, and masochism runs deep, so I opened it. There she was, dancing with some random guy I'd never seen before. Not just dancing, grinding. His hands were on her waist, she was pressed up against him, and the caption read, "Finally dancing with someone who knows how to have fun woman dancing sparkles." The dig was subtle but crystal clear. Someone who knows how to have fun, as opposed to her uptight, obsessed husband who couldn't handle watching his wife make out with her ex. I screenshot it before it disappeared, my hands actually shaking. Not from anger. Well, not just anger, but from this sick combination of betrayal and disbelief. This was my wife. The woman who'd promised to love and cherish me. The woman who, just 6 hours ago, had kissed me goodbye and told me she loved me before we left for the party. Story number 2 dropped 15 minutes later. Another guy, another dance, another caption designed to twist the knife. This is what happens when you try to control me, face with rolling eyes. Control her. Right. Because asking your spouse not to tongue wrestle their ex at parties is basically domestic tyranny. By midnight, she'd posted 7 stories. 7. Each one more deliberately hurtful than the last. There was one of her doing shots with a group of guys I didn't recognize, captioned, "New friends who don't come with baggage." Another showed her on some dude's lap during what looked like a game of truth or dare, with the caption, "Freedom feels so good." But the 8th story, that was the one that made me want to put my fist through the wall. It was a video of her making out with not one, but 2 different guys at the party. The caption read, "Single life hits different kiss mark," and she'd tagged Tina, Grace, and Leah in every single fucking story. Single life. We were still married. I was sitting in our house, looking at our wedding photos on the mantle, and she was telling the internet she was single. My phone buzzed with notifications. Comments, likes, heart eye emojis from her friends. YSSS Queen, from Grace. Get it girl, from Tina. About time, from Leah. Even people I barely knew were commenting. Egging her on like this was some kind of empowerment moment instead of a married woman publicly destroying her husband. I kept screenshotting everything, partly for evidence and partly because I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Each story felt like a punch to the gut, but I couldn't stop watching. It was like passing a car accident, horrifying but impossible to look away from. Around 1 a.m., she posted what I thought would be the final story. A group selfie with about 6 guys, everyone holding drinks, everyone laughing. The caption, "Why settle for one when you can have them all?" Smiling face with horns. That one made me physically nauseous. I actually had to put my phone down and take deep breaths to keep from throwing up. This wasn't just disrespect anymore. This was cruelty. This was my wife, the person who was supposed to have my back, publicly humiliating me for sport. But wait, there's more. Because at 2:30 a.m., like some kind of sadistic infomercial, she dropped the grand finale. A video of her slow dancing with Logan, her head on his shoulder, looking more content than I'd seen her look with me in months. The caption was simple, "Some people just get you." And there it was. The final nail in the coffin of our marriage, delivered via Instagram story for maximum impact. I must have watched that last video 50 times, looking for some sign that this was all just alcohol-fueled stupidity. Some indication that she'd regret it in the morning. But the way she looked at him, the way she melted into his arms, that wasn't drunk behavior. That was someone who'd found exactly what she'd been looking for. At 3 a.m., I heard her car in the driveway. I was still on the couch, still holding my phone, still processing the digital devastation she'd unleashed. Part of me wanted to pretend to be asleep, to avoid the conversation I knew was coming. But a bigger part of me, the part that was apparently a glutton for punishment, wanted to see how she'd try to spin this. The front door opened, and she stumbled in, clearly wasted. Her hair was a mess, her makeup was smudged, and she reeked of cigarettes and some cologne that definitely wasn't mine. She looked like she'd been through a hurricane, but she was smiling. Actually fucking smiling. "Hey babe," she slurred, leaning against the doorframe like she was posing for another Instagram story. "You're still up. Hard to sleep when your wife is posting softcore porn on social media," I said, holding up my phone to show her the screenshots. She squinted at the screen, then laughed. Not a nervous laugh or an embarrassed laugh. A genuine, amused laugh like I'd just told her a really good joke. "Oh those," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "Come on, don't be so uptight. It was just a party." Just a party. Right. And the Titanic was just a boat ride. You made out with Logan, I said, my voice eerily calm considering the rage building in my chest. On camera. And posted it online. She shrugged, actually fucking shrugged, and kicked off her heels. So? We're not together anymore. It's not like it means anything. We're married, Marissa. Yeah. And you left me at the party like a child. She shot back, her tone shifting from drunk and playful to sharp and defensive. You embarrassed me in front of everyone. The audacity was breathtaking. I'd embarrassed her by leaving after watching her tongue wrestle her ex-boyfriend. But her making out with multiple men and posting it online was just harmless fun. You told the internet you were single. I continued, scrolling through the screenshots. You literally captioned a video, single life, hits different. She stumbled over to the couch and collapsed next to me, close enough that I could smell the alcohol on her breath mixed with that unfamiliar cologne. Baby, you're being way too serious about this, she said, her voice taking on that patronizing tone I'd grown to hate. It's just social media. Nobody takes that stuff seriously. Nobody except the hundreds of people who'd seen it, including our friends, family members, and co-workers who followed her account. Every girl cheats, she said suddenly, her voice matter-of-fact like she was discussing the weather. At least I did it to your face. The words hit me like a physical blow. Every girl cheats. Like it was some universal truth, some biological imperative that I was too naive to understand. And she was proud of her honesty, proud that she'd humiliated me publicly instead of doing it behind my back. That's what makes me a good wife, she continued, leaning her head back against the couch cushion. I don't sneak around. I don't lie. I show you exactly who I am. She was right about that last part. She was showing me exactly who she was. Someone who thought marriage vows were suggestions. Someone who believed respect was optional. Someone who got off on causing me pain. You're drunk, I said, standing up and putting distance between us. We'll talk about this tomorrow. No, we won't, she said, her eyes still closed but her voice sharp. Because tomorrow you'll apologize for being dramatic, and I'll forgive you for embarrassing me at Derek's party, and we'll go back to normal. That's how this works. That's how this works. Like our marriage was some kind of scripted drama where I played the apologetic husband and she played the misunderstood wife. Like my feelings were just props in her performance. She struggled to her feet, swaying slightly. You know what your problem is? She said, pointing a manicured finger at my chest. You take everything so seriously. It was just kissing. It was just dancing. It was just having fun. You act like I committed murder. Just kissing. Just dancing. Just having fun. Just destroying our marriage one Instagram story at a time. I'm going to bed, I said, heading toward the stairs. Good, she called after me. Maybe sleeping alone will help you remember what you're fighting for. I stopped halfway up the stairs and turned back to look at her. She was slumped on the couch, scrolling through her phone, probably reading all the comments and likes on her stories. She looked satisfied, accomplished, like she'd just had the best night of her life. That's when it hit me. She wasn't drunk rambling or saying things she didn't mean. She was telling me the truth. This was who she really was when she thought she could get away with it. This was my wife without the mask. Every girl cheats. The words echoed in my head as I lay in our bed alone, staring at the ceiling. She hadn't just kissed Logan. She'd kissed multiple guys, danced with strangers, and broadcast it all like it was some kind of victory lap. And in her mind, I was the problem for not being okay with it. I grabbed my phone and looked at the stories one more time before they expired. Each one was a little piece of our marriage dying in real time, documented and celebrated for posterity. Tomorrow, they'd be gone from her profile, but the screenshots would remain. Evidence of the night my wife showed me exactly how little our marriage meant to her. The worst part wasn't even the cheating or the public humiliation. It was the realization that this had been building for months, maybe longer. All those times she'd called me obsessed or controlling, all those whispered conversations with her friends. This was what she'd been working toward. The freedom to do whatever she wanted without consequences. Well, congratulations, Marissa. Mission fucking accomplished. You know what's funny about hitting rock bottom? The view is actually pretty clear from down there. All the bullshit that seemed complicated before suddenly becomes simple. All the excuses you made for someone's behavior stop making sense. And all the power they thought they had over you just evaporates. That's where I found myself Saturday morning, sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago, staring at my phone like it was a loaded weapon. For months, maybe years, I'd been playing Marissa's game by her rules. Every time she crossed a line, I'd react exactly how she expected. I'd get upset, we'd fight. I'd eventually apologize for being too sensitive, and she'd graciously forgive me for having feelings. Well, fuck that game. Time to change the rules. I turned my phone off. Not on silent, not on do not disturb, completely off. The sudden quiet was almost jarring after months of constant notifications, calls, and text battles. For the first time in forever, I could actually hear myself think without Marissa's voice drowning out my own thoughts. The plan was simple, complete radio silence. No calls, no texts, no social media interactions, nothing. If Marissa wanted to act single, I'd let her experience what being single actually felt like. No husband to blame for her problems, no emotional punching bag to absorb her drama, no guaranteed audience for her victim performance. I tried everything else: reasoning, fighting, compromise, therapy suggestions. None of it worked because you can't reason with someone who doesn't want to be reasonable. You can't fix someone who doesn't think they're broken. But you can remove yourself from the equation entirely. Sunday came and went in blissful silence. I cleaned the house, watched football, ordered pizza, and did absolutely nothing that involved thinking about my wife or our train wreck of a marriage. It was the most peaceful day I'd had in months. Monday morning, I turned my phone back on just long enough to check work messages. 3 missed calls from Marissa, all from Sunday evening. No voicemails. Interesting. Usually she'd leave long, rambling messages about how I was being immature or dramatic. The fact that she hadn't left any told me she was starting to realize this wasn't business as usual. I turned the phone back off and went to work. Tuesday was when things got interesting. I could practically feel her confusion through the walls of our house as I got ready for work. She was awake. I could hear her moving around in the bedroom, but I didn't acknowledge her. Didn't say good morning, didn't ask about her hangover, didn't even look in her direction. I grabbed my coffee, my keys, and left like she was a piece of furniture. When I got to work, Aaron took one look at me and grinned. "You look different," he said. "Less like someone's been slowly murdering your soul." "Funny you should mention that," I said, settling into my desk chair with my first genuine smile in weeks. I think my soul might actually be growing back. By lunch, my phone, which I'd turned on to check work emails, showed 17 missed calls from Marissa. 17. That was more calls than she'd made to me in the previous month combined. Still no voicemails, but the text had started. "Why aren't you answering your phone? This is ridiculous. You're being childish. We need to talk like adults. Call me back now." Each text was progressively more desperate, and I could practically see her panic growing with every unanswered message. For the first time in our relationship, I wasn't dancing to her tune, and she had no idea how to handle it. I deleted the texts without responding and turned the phone back off. Wednesday brought escalation. 23 missed calls. The texts had evolved from demanding to pleading. "Baby, please call me back. I know you're upset, but this silent treatment isn't solving anything. Can we please just talk? I miss you." Miss me? She missed having someone to blame for her problems. She missed having a guaranteed audience for her drama. She missed the power she'd held over me for months. But she didn't miss me. If she'd missed me, she wouldn't have spent Saturday night making out with half the party while posting it online for everyone to see. Thursday was my personal favorite. 31 missed calls and a text marathon that would have impressed a teenager. This is insane. You can't just ignore me forever. I was drunk. People do stupid things when they're drunk. Why are you being so dramatic about one stupid kiss? Logan means nothing to me. You're my husband. Act like it. Fine. Be a baby. See if I care. Wait, I didn't mean that. Please just call me. I'm sorry you got upset. That last one was my favorite. She was sorry I got upset. Not sorry for what she did. Not sorry for humiliating me. Not sorry for posting it online. Sorry that I had the audacity to have feelings about watching my wife cheat on me in public. Classic Marissa. Even her apologies were about my reactions, not her actions. Friday afternoon, my sister Clara called me at work. "What the hell is going on with you and Marissa?" she asked without preamble. She called Mom crying about how you're giving her the silent treatment over nothing. There it was. When the direct approach failed, Marissa had moved to phase 2. Recruit family members to guilt me into submission. She kissed her ex-boyfriend at a party and posted videos of herself making out with random guys on Instagram. I said calmly. How exactly is that nothing? Silence on the other end of the line. Then, Jesus Christ. Are you serious? Dead serious. And she's calling it nothing? Apparently, I'm being dramatic and controlling for not being thrilled about it. Clara let out a long breath. You know, I never really liked her, she said. But I figured that was just protective sister stuff. Now I'm thinking my instincts were spot on. It was funny how other people could see what I'd been blind to for months. Clara had always been polite to Marissa, but never warm, never enthusiastic about our relationship. I'd chalked it up to typical sister-in-law dynamics. But maybe she'd been seeing red flags I'd been too love-drunk to notice. She doesn't fear losing you because you've never let her, Clara continued. Every time she pulls this crap, you chase after her, apologize, try to fix things. She's learned that no matter how badly she treats you, you'll always come crawling back. The truth hurt, but it was the kind of pain that clarifies things. Like setting a broken bone, agonizing but necessary. So what are you going to do? She asked. Nothing, I said. Absolutely nothing. And that's exactly what I did. Nothing. No calls, no texts, no attempts at reconciliation. I went to work, came home, made dinner for one, and lived my life like I was actually single instead of just pretending to be on social media. The missed calls kept coming, sometimes 20 a day. The texts grew increasingly frantic, cycling between anger and desperation like she was stuck in some kind of emotional washing machine. She'd go from, "You're being ridiculous," to "Please don't give up on us," within the span of an hour. By the following Tuesday, something had shifted. The texts weren't coming in angry bursts anymore. They were scattered throughout the day, each one more vulnerable than the last. I can't eat. I can't sleep. Please just tell me you still love me. I don't understand what's happening. That last one almost made me laugh. She didn't understand what was happening. For the first time in our relationship, I wasn't absorbing her bad behavior and apologizing for my reactions. For the first time, there were actual consequences for treating me like garbage. Of course, she didn't understand. This had never happened before. The really beautiful part was watching her scramble to regain control. She tried everything, sending her friends to text me, blocked, having her mom call, ignored, even showing up at places she thought I might be. But I was a ghost, completely unavailable for her usual manipulation tactics. My silence had become a mirror, reflecting her behavior back at her without my usual cushioning of explanations and forgiveness. And she didn't like what she saw. For years, I'd been her emotional shock absorber, soaking up all the impact of her selfish choices so she never had to feel the consequences. Every time she crossed a line, I'd been there to minimize the damage, make excuses, smooth things over. I'd trained her to believe that no matter what she did, I'd always be there to clean up the mess. Well, surprise. The cleanup crew had gone on strike indefinitely. Friday rolled around like a ticking time bomb, and I should have known Marissa wouldn't go quietly into that good night of being ignored. See, the thing about people who are used to getting their way is that when you stop playing their game, they don't just accept defeat, they escalate. They bring out the big guns. And in Marissa's case, the big guns apparently meant staging a public intervention at my workplace like some kind of deranged relationship terrorist. I was in the middle of reviewing quarterly reports when Aaron appeared at my cubicle looking like he'd just witnessed a car accident. His face was this perfect mixture of concern and barely contained amusement, which immediately put me on high alert. "Dude," he said, glancing around to make sure nobody else was listening. "Some lady's in the lobby making a scene. Security's trying to calm her down, but she's demanding to see you. Says she's your wife." My stomach dropped straight through the floor and into the building's foundation. Blonde, about 5'6", looks like she could murder someone with her eyeballs. "That's the one," Aaron confirmed. "She's got this whole, 'I'm a victim of domestic abuse' vibe going on, except instead of asking for help, she's demanding they produce you immediately or she's calling corporate." Of course she was. Because when emotional manipulation fails, the next logical step is professional sabotage. I could practically picture her in the lobby, probably wearing something calculated to make her look vulnerable yet determined, telling everyone who'd listen about her poor husband who'd been acting strangely lately. "Want me to tell security you're not available?" Aaron offered. The temptation was real. I could hide in the office until she got tired and left, avoid the whole confrontation, and maintain my silent strategy. But something in me, maybe pride, maybe stupidity, maybe just exhaustion from running away, decided it was time to face the music. No, I said, standing up and straightening my tie. If she wants a showdown, she can have one. The elevator ride down to the lobby felt like descending into hell, except hell probably had better mood lighting. When the doors opened, I could hear her before I could see her, that particular pitch of indignation that meant she was in full performance mode. There she was, center stage in our building's lobby, surrounded by confused security guards and a growing audience of my coworkers who'd come down for their lunch break. She'd chosen her outfit carefully, a simple dress that screamed, responsible wife, minimal makeup to emphasize her distress, and body language that suggested she was barely holding herself together. The performance was masterful, really. She should have gone into theater. The second she spotted me, her entire demeanor shifted. The frantic energy evaporated, replaced by this calculated vulnerability that made my skin crawl. She approached me like I was a wild animal that might bolt at any second. "There you are," she said, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear, but soft enough to sound concerned rather than accusatory. "I've been so worried about you." Worried, right. She'd been worried about losing control of the narrative, not worried about my well-being. "Marissa," I said evenly, very aware that half my office was now watching this unfold like it was better than cable TV. "What are you doing here?" "We need to talk," she said, stepping closer and lowering her voice to an intimate whisper that somehow managed to carry across the entire lobby. "Like adults. This silent treatment is killing me." The audacity was breathtaking. After a week of completely ignoring my existence except to post revenge porn on Instagram, she was positioning herself as the mature one trying to fix our relationship. The woman who'd made out with her ex-boyfriend in front of 30 people was lecturing me about adult communication. "I'm at work," I pointed out, gesturing to the obvious office building around us. "This isn't the place for personal conversations." "Then where is?" she demanded. And there it was, a flash of the real Marissa underneath the concerned wife act. "You won't answer your phone, you won't come home, you won't talk to me." What choice did I have? Home. That was rich. I'd been living in our house all week while she stayed God knows where, probably with Tina, or at some guy's place she'd met at Derek's party. But sure, I was the one who wouldn't come home. My coworkers were pretending to mind their own business, but I could feel their attention like heat lamps. Sarah from accounting was openly staring while pretending to check her phone. Mike from IT had suddenly developed a fascination with the lobby's architectural details. Even building security looked invested in how this drama would unfold. "You want to talk like adults?" I said, matching her volume so everyone could hear. "Fine. Let's talk about Saturday night." Her face went pale. This wasn't part of her script. She'd come here expecting to paint me as the unreasonable husband who was punishing his innocent wife for no reason. She hadn't counted on me being willing to air our dirty laundry in front of my colleagues. We don't need to," she stammered, glancing around nervously at our growing audience. "No, let's do this," I continued, my voice getting stronger. "Let's talk about how you made out with your ex-boyfriend at a party. Let's talk about the Instagram stories where you grinded on random guys and told the internet you were single. Let's talk about coming home at 3 a.m. telling me every girl cheats, and I should be grateful you did it to my face." The lobby had gone dead silent. Even the security guards had stopped pretending they weren't listening. Marissa's carefully constructed victim narrative was crumbling in real time, and she knew it. "You're embarrassing me," she hissed, but her voice cracked on the last word. "I'm embarrassing you?" I let out a laugh that came out harsher than I intended. "Lady, you embarrassed yourself. I'm just providing context." She tried to recover, switching tactics like a politician caught in a scandal. "I was drunk," she said, her voice taking on that pleading tone she used when she wanted sympathy. "People do stupid things when they're drunk. You know I didn't mean any of it." "Which part didn't you mean?" I asked. "The kissing? The dancing? The part where you told me every girl cheats? Or the part where you called our marriage a joke on social media?" Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. She'd never had to defend her behavior in front of an audience before. Usually, our fights happened in private where she could manipulate the narrative and make me feel crazy for having reasonable expectations. "We can fix this," she said desperately, reaching for my arm. We just need to communicate better. I know we can work through this if you just... No, I said, stepping back so she couldn't touch me. We're done. The words came out clearer and stronger than I'd expected. For months, I'd been afraid to say them, terrified of what my life would look like without her. But standing there in that lobby, surrounded by witnesses, I realized the life I'd been trying to save wasn't worth saving. Her face went through about 6 different emotions in rapid succession: shock, anger, disbelief, panic, and finally, desperation. You don't mean that, she said, but her voice was barely above a whisper now. I mean every word of it, I said. I'm done being your emotional punching bag. I'm done making excuses for your behavior. I'm done pretending that what you did was normal or acceptable or forgivable. The lobby was so quiet you could have heard a pin drop. Everyone was frozen, like they were afraid any movement would break the spell and interrupt the best drama they'd seen all year. But I love you, Marissa said, and for a split second, she almost sounded sincere. Almost. No, you don't, I replied. You love having someone to blame for your problems. You love having a husband you can disrespect without consequences. You love the safety net I provided while you acted single. But you don't love me. She started crying then. Real tears, not the calculated ones she usually deployed during arguments. But even as the waterworks started, I could see her scanning the crowd, calculating how this breakdown would play with our audience. Everyone makes mistakes, she sobbed, playing to the room now. Marriage is about forgiveness, about working through problems together. You're right, I said. Marriage is about working through problems together. It's also about respect, loyalty, and not making out with your ex-boyfriend at parties. Funny how you forgot those parts. The tears were flowing freely now, and I could see a few people in the crowd starting to look sympathetic. Marissa had always been good at playing the victim when cornered, and crying beautiful women tend to get the benefit of the doubt from strangers. But I was done caring about optics. I was done protecting her reputation at the expense of my sanity. I made one mistake, she pleaded. One stupid, drunk mistake. Please don't throw away 3 years of marriage over one night. One mistake. She was still trying to minimize it, still trying to rewrite history to make herself look better. The Instagram stories, the grinding, the multiple make-out sessions, all condensed into one mistake, like she'd accidentally ordered the wrong coffee. It wasn't one mistake, I said firmly. It was months of disrespect building up to one public humiliation. The kissing was just the grand finale. I turned to walk away, and she grabbed my arm. Please, she whispered. Don't do this. Not here. Not like this. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Then I remembered the triumphant smile on her face when she kissed Logan. I remembered her laughing as her friends filmed it. I remembered her telling me every girl cheats like it was some kind of universal truth I was too naive to understand. You did this, I said, gently but firmly removing her hand from my arm. Not here, not like this. You chose the when and where when you decided to destroy our marriage at a party. I'm just choosing not to pretend it didn't happen. And with that, I walked away. For the first time in our entire relationship, I walked away while she was still talking, while she was still crying, while she was still expecting me to cave and comfort her and apologize for my reaction to her betrayal. But I didn't look back. Not once. Saturday morning brought the kind of phone call that makes you want to throw your device into the nearest body of water. My phone buzzed at 8 a.m. sharp, because apparently destroying marriages is an early bird activity, and the caller ID showed Marissa's mom, Patricia. I should have let it go to voicemail, but curiosity killed the cat, and I was apparently the cat in this scenario. Hello, Patricia, I answered, already knowing this conversation was going to be about as pleasant as a root canal performed with rusty garden tools. Oh, honey, she started, her voice dripping with that fake sympathy that older women perfect after decades of meddling in other people's business. I heard about your little fight with Marissa. She's absolutely heartbroken. Little fight. Right. Because public adultery followed by social media humiliation was just a little fight between married couples. Like arguing over whose turn it was to take out the trash. Patricia, I don't think Marissa gave you the full story, I said, trying to keep my voice calm even though I wanted to scream into the phone. She told me everything. Patricia interrupted, her tone shifting from sympathetic to defensive faster than a NASCAR driver changing lanes. She said you got jealous over her talking to an old friend and now you're punishing her with this silent treatment. Honestly, I'm disappointed in you. Talking to an old friend. That's what we were calling tongue wrestling your ex-boyfriend now. The English language was truly a beautiful thing in the hands of someone determined to rewrite reality. She kissed him, Patricia, at a party, in front of 30 people, then posted videos of herself making out with other guys on Instagram. Silence. Then, well, she was drinking. You know how girls get when they've had a few. She doesn't handle alcohol well. The excuse-making was Olympic level. Apparently, alcohol was a magical substance that temporarily erased marriage vows and common decency. Who knew? Drinking doesn't make you cheat, I said. It just removes the inhibition to do what you already wanted to do. Don't be so dramatic, Patricia snapped. Marriage is about forgiveness. It's about working through problems together, not running away at the first sign of trouble. First sign of trouble. Like I'd bailed after she left a dirty dish in the sink instead of after months of gaslighting followed by public adultery. She loves you. Patricia continued, really warming up to her speech now. She made a mistake, a silly, drunk mistake, and now you're throwing away 3 years of marriage over it. Don't you think that's a bit extreme? There it was again. The minimization, the blame shifting, the complete refusal to acknowledge what had actually happened. Marissa had learned these tactics somewhere, and now I knew where. The apple hadn't fallen far from the tree. It had barely rolled off the branch. I appreciate your concern. I lied through my teeth. But this is between Marissa and me. That poor girl is beside herself. Patricia pressed on, apparently immune to social cues about ending conversations. She can barely eat, can barely sleep. Is this really what you want? To hurt someone you claim to love? Poor girl. The poor girl who'd spent last Saturday grinding on strangers and broadcasting it to the world. My heart was absolutely breaking for her. I hung up. Within an hour, my own phone rang again. This time it was my mother, Elaine, and the fury in her voice was immediately apparent. What the hell is wrong with you? She started without preamble. Patricia Williams just called me crying about how you're treating Marissa. She says you're being cruel and vindictive over some silly party incident. Oh, perfect. The mothers had formed an alliance. This was exactly what my Friday needed. A tag team guilt session from 2 women who'd gotten a completely fabricated version of events. Mom, let me explain what actually. No, you let me explain something, she interrupted, her voice hitting that particular frequency that meant she was in full lecture mode. Marriage isn't easy. It takes work, compromise, and forgiveness. You can't just throw it away because your wife had a few drinks and talked to an old friend. Talk to an old friend. Jesus Christ, the narrative was evolving faster than a virus. First it was talking, then it became being friendly, and apparently now it was just casual conversation with a former acquaintance. She didn't just talk to him, Mom. I don't want to hear excuses. Elaine cut me off. Patricia told me everything. Marissa was being social at a party. You got jealous. And now you're punishing her by refusing to communicate. That's not how marriage works. The irony was suffocating. My mother was lecturing me about how marriage works based on information from the woman whose daughter had just publicly cheated on me. It was like getting relationship advice from someone whose primary source was a pathological liar. You need to apologize, she continued, really hitting her stride now. You need to go home, sit down with your wife, and work this out like adults. This silent treatment nonsense is childish and cruel. I could hear my father in the background asking what was going on. More voices joining the conversation. Apparently this had turned into a family conference call about my failing marriage. Perfect. Nothing says healthy relationship dynamics, like having your parents gang up on you based on your cheating wife's victim narrative. She says you've been acting unstable lately, Mom added, and that word hit me like a slap. Patricia's worried about your mental state. Maybe you should talk to someone, get some help. Unstable. Now I was mentally ill for not wanting to be married to someone who treated our vows like suggestions. The gaslighting had reached professional levels. Not only was I wrong for being upset, I was literally crazy for having feelings about public infidelity. That's when something inside me finally snapped. Not in a violent way, but in a clarity way. Like fog lifting to reveal the landscape you've been stumbling through blind. Mom, I need to send you something, I said, putting the call on speaker and opening my phone's photo gallery. Give me your number. What? Just trust me. I think you need to see what really happened before you lecture me about forgiveness. I could hear her dictating her number to Dad, probably thinking I was about to send her some ridiculous evidence of my paranoia. Boy, was she in for a treat. I forwarded her the screenshots, all of them. The Instagram stories, the text messages, the whole digital record of Saturday night's festivities. Every caption, every video, every piece of evidence that proved Marissa's version of events was complete fiction. Look at your phone, I said. Silence. Then rustling sounds as she presumably opened the messages. Then a long, sharp intake of breath. Oh my God, she whispered. Keep scrolling, I said. There's more. More silence. More rustling. Then my father's voice in the background. What is it, Elaine? What's wrong? She posted videos of herself. Mom's voice trailed off like she couldn't quite process what she was seeing. Keep going, I said grimly. You haven't gotten to the good part yet. Another minute passed. I could hear my parents whispering to each other, their voices getting more upset with each screenshot. The caption says, "Single life hits different," Mom said finally, her voice hollow. She's dancing with 3 different men. Now do you understand why I'm not rushing to apologize? I asked. Jesus Christ. Dad's voice came through clearly now. Son, I'm sorry. We had no idea. Because she lied to you, I said. Just like she's been lying to me for months. Patricia called you with a completely made-up version of events, and you believed it because why wouldn't you? Who lies about something like this? Sociopaths, Aaron said from behind me. I hadn't heard him approach, but apparently he'd come down to check on me and caught the tail end of my family conference call. Sociopaths lie about stuff like this. Mom was quiet for a long moment. Then, honey, I owe you an enormous apology. Patricia painted a completely different picture. She said Marissa was being friendly and you got upset over nothing. She's been calling me unstable and vindictive, I said, telling everyone who'll listen that I'm mentally ill for not wanting my wife to cheat on me. That manipulative little, Dad started, then caught himself. I'm sorry, son. We should have listened to your side first. It's fine, I said, though it really wasn't. Now you know why I'm not answering her calls. Good, Mom said firmly. Don't answer them. That girl needs to face consequences for once in her life. The conversation ended with promises to support whatever decision I made and threats to give Patricia a piece of their mind the next time she called with Marissa's sob stories. Apparently, seeing actual evidence had a way of clarifying things that emotional manipulation couldn't overcome. I hung up feeling lighter than I had in weeks. For the first time since this nightmare began, I had people in my corner who understood what I was dealing with. People who'd seen the evidence and recognized it for what it was. Calculated cruelty disguised as drunken mistakes. Aaron clapped me on the shoulder. Man, that was brutal to watch, but you handled it perfectly. Thanks for having my back, I said. Always, he replied. Besides, now the whole office knows your wife's crazy. That should make the divorce proceedings interesting. Divorce. The word didn't scare me anymore. If anything, it sounded like freedom. You know what they say about cornered animals? They get vicious. Well, turns out cornered wives who've lost control of their narrative don't just get vicious. They go full psycho stalker mode. And let me tell you, having your own spouse transform into your personal nightmare is exactly as fun as it sounds. When Marissa realized that public humiliation and family manipulation weren't working, she decided to take her show on the road. Literally. The woman who'd spent months calling me obsessed had apparently decided to give me a masterclass in what actual obsession looked like. It started with the late-night text bombardments. I'm talking military-level psychological warfare through digital communication. One night, I'll never forget it because I actually counted. She sent me 29 text messages between 2 and 5 a.m. 29. That's roughly one every 6 minutes for 3 straight hours. The dedication was almost impressive if it wasn't so completely unhinged. The messages themselves were a roller coaster of emotion that would have given a therapist enough material for a doctoral thesis. She'd start sweet. Baby, I miss you so much. Please just talk to me. Then escalate to desperate. I can't eat. I can't sleep. I feel like I'm dying without you. Then spiral into rage. You're being a fucking child. This is ridiculous. My personal favorite from that particular night was, you're destroying everything over one joke. One joke. Do you hear how insane that sounds? One joke. She was still calling it a joke. Making out with her ex-boyfriend in front of 30 people while her friends filmed it was apparently peak comedy. I should have been laughing instead of filing for divorce, according to Marissa's twisted logic. But the real gems came around 4 a.m. when the alcohol or desperation or whatever demon was possessing her really took hold. I can't live without you. I'll make sure you regret this. You think you're so perfect, but you're not. I know things about you that would destroy you. Please, baby, please, please, please call me back. I fucking hate you. I didn't mean that I love you so much. Reading through them the next morning was like watching someone have a complete mental breakdown in real time via text message. The woman who'd spent months gaslighting me about being obsessive was sending me novel-length messages in the middle of the night, threatening me 1 minute and professing love the next. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife. But text messages were apparently just the opening act. Tuesday evening, I came home from work to find my neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, waiting for me in her front yard with this expression that said she had some serious tea to spill. Your wife's been sitting on your parents' porch since noon, she informed me, clearly delighted to be the bearer of dramatic news. Just sitting there, crying. Wouldn't leave when your dad asked her to. My parents' house. She'd driven 20 minutes across town to stage a sit-in at my childhood home. The woman who couldn't be bothered to text me back for hours when we were actually together had apparently developed the patience of a monk when it came to stalking my family. I called my dad. Yeah, she's still here, he confirmed, his voice tight with frustration. Been here for 6 hours now. Every time we ask her to leave, she starts crying about how she needs to explain herself to you. What's she saying? The usual bullshit, Dad replied, and I could hear Mom agreeing in the background. She's going on about your good memories, holidays, trips, anniversaries, making it sound like you're throwing away years of happiness over nothing. Good memories. Sure, we'd had some. Every toxic relationship does. That's how they keep you hooked. But a few good moments don't erase months of systematic disrespect and public humiliation. A romantic vacation doesn't cancel out coming home to find your wife posting videos of herself making out with strangers. She keeps saying it was just one bad night, Dad continued. That she was peer pressured into it. That the alcohol made her do things she didn't mean. But son, I've seen those videos. That wasn't peer pressure. That was someone who wanted to hurt you. Bingo. Even my parents, who'd been married for 35 years and believed in working through problems, could see what Marissa was trying to hide behind her victim act. She's not taking responsibility for anything. Mom called out loud enough for me to hear. It's all excuses and blame shifting. The alcohol made me do it. My friends dared me. He should have trusted me more. Everything except, I fucked up, and I'm sorry. Around 7 p.m., Dad had apparently reached his limit. Look, honey, I heard him say in the background, his voice getting closer to the phone. You need to leave now? This isn't your house, and you're not welcome here anymore. I just need him to understand. Came Marissa's voice, faint but audible through the phone. We had such beautiful memories together. Our first Christmas, that trip to Napa, our anniversary dinner. Doesn't that count for something? Beautiful memories. She was right. We had made some good ones. But you know what's funny about memories? They don't mean much when the person you made them with turns out to be someone completely different than who you thought they were. Those memories don't excuse what you did, Dad said firmly. And they don't entitle you to camp out on our porch until you get your way. I can't live without him, Marissa said, her voice breaking. You don't understand. I made one mistake. One stupid, drunk mistake. And he's ready to throw away 3 years of marriage. One mistake. There it was again. The party, the Instagram stories, the public humiliation, the complete lack of accountability, all condensed into one convenient little mistake that I was being unreasonable for caring about. It wasn't a mistake. Mom's voice came through clearly now. Mistakes are accidental. What you did was intentional, cruel, and designed to hurt our son. And now you're trying to manipulate us into fixing what you broke. I could hear Marissa starting to cry. Real tears this time, not the calculated ones she usually deployed. But even through the sobs, she was still making excuses. The girls dare me to do it, she sobbed. They said I was too controlled by him, that I needed to prove I was my own person. It was peer pressure. I was drunk. I didn't mean for it to go that far. Peer pressure. At 28 years old. Married. With a mortgage and a joint bank account. But sure, blame it on peer pressure like she was a teenager at her first kegger. You're an adult. Dad said bluntly. Adults don't use peer pressure as an excuse for destroying their marriages. Please, Marissa begged. Just let me talk to him for 5 minutes. 5 minutes to explain. He doesn't want to talk to you, Mom said. And frankly, after seeing what you did, I don't blame him. The conversation went on for another hour, my parents basically tag-teaming her with reality while she cried and made excuses. Finally, Dad delivered the ultimatum. You have 5 minutes to get off our property, or I'm calling the police. Fine, Marissa said, her voice shifting from desperate to cold in an instant. But this isn't over. That's when I knew I was dealing with someone who'd completely lost touch with reality. She'd publicly cheated, lied to both our families, stalked me for a week, and was now making threats because I wouldn't accept her non-apology for behavior that would make a soap opera villain blush. Did you hear that? Dad asked into the phone. I heard it, I confirmed. And it's exactly why I'm not going back to her. This wasn't over, according to Marissa. Well, she was right about that. But it wasn't going to end the way she thought it would. She'd escalated from manipulation to stalking to threats, and each move just proved how right I'd been to walk away. Time to set a trap. Sometimes the best way to catch a liar is to give them enough rope to hang themselves with. And after a week of Marissa's increasingly unhinged behavior, I realized she was practically begging for that rope. All I had to do was hand it to her with a smile and let her do what she did best, destroy herself with her own words. Thursday morning, I crafted the text message that would either end this nightmare or escalate it to levels that would require legal intervention. Either way, I'd have my answer about who I was really married to. We should talk privately. No interruptions. No family, no friends, just us. I think we owe each other that much. I hit send and watched the 3 dots appear almost immediately. She was probably staring at her phone, trying to decode whether this was surrender or another trap. The response came back in under 30 seconds. Yes. Thank you. When and where? The desperation was palpable even through text. All caps. Yes. Like I'd just offered her a life preserver while she was drowning. Which, in a way, I guess I had. She was drowning in her own lies and manipulation, and I was offering her what looked like salvation. Saturday, 2 p.m. Your apartment. Just us. Perfect. I love you so much. We're going to fix this. Fix this. Right. Because there was definitely a way to fix public adultery followed by a week of stalking and family manipulation. Some problems are like a shattered mirror. You can try to glue the pieces back together, but it'll never look the same, and you'll always see the cracks. Saturday couldn't come fast enough. I spent Friday night preparing like I was going into battle, which in a way I was. I charged my phone to 100%, tested the recording app 3 times, and mentally rehearsed the conversation I was about to have. This wasn't about reconciliation. This was about getting the truth on record. Her apartment complex looked the same as always, but somehow everything felt different as I walked up to her door. Maybe because the last time I'd been here, I'd still believed our marriage was salvageable. Now I knew better. She answered the door before I could knock, which meant she'd been watching for me through the window like a lovesick teenager. The sight of her hit me harder than I'd expected. Not because I missed her, but because of how obviously calculated everything was. The apartment was spotless. Not just clean, spotless. Every surface gleamed, every throw pillow was perfectly positioned, and there wasn't a single dish in the sink. Marissa had clearly spent hours preparing for this meeting, staging the environment to remind me of the domestic bliss we'd supposedly shared. She'd chosen her outfit just as carefully. A simple sundress that hit just above the knee. Conservative enough to suggest she was a reformed woman, fitted enough to remind me what I was supposedly giving up. Her makeup was minimal but perfect, like she'd spent an hour creating the illusion of natural beauty. Her hair was styled in soft waves that made her look younger, more innocent. The whole scene screamed, loving wife waiting for her husband to come to his senses. It was masterful manipulation disguised as domestic normalcy. You came, she said softly, stepping back to let me in. Her voice was gentle, vulnerable, completely different from the woman who'd threatened me on my parents' porch 3 days earlier. I said I would. I replied, slipping my phone into my jacket pocket with the recording app already running. We need to talk. She'd prepared refreshments, my favorite beer, homemade cookies, even the good cheese and crackers she usually saved for company. Every detail was designed to remind me of what I was walking away from. To make me feel like an idiot for throwing away someone who clearly cared about making me comfortable. Sit, she said, patting the couch beside her. Please. I chose the chair across from her instead. Distance was important for what was coming next, both physical and emotional. Her face fell slightly at my seating choice, but she recovered quickly. I'm glad you're here, she said, folding her hands in her lap like a repentant schoolgirl. I've had so much time to think this week, and I realize how badly I screwed up. Screwed up. Interesting word choice. Not betrayed our marriage or humiliated you publicly. Just screwed up, like she'd forgotten to pick up milk from the store. Tell me about it, I said, settling back in the chair. Help me understand what happened that night. She took a deep breath, and I could see her accessing her prepared speech. This was going to be good. It was peer pressure, she began, her voice soft and ashamed. I know that sounds stupid at our age, but you don't know how the girls can be. They've been saying for months that you're too controlling, that I don't have enough freedom. Ah, there it was. Even in her confession, she was blaming me. I was too controlling, which justified her friends pressuring her to cheat. Beautiful logic. Go on, I said neutrally. They said I needed to prove I wasn't under your thumb, she continued, warming up to her victim narrative. That I should show everyone I could do what I wanted. It was like a dare, you know? Like, if you're really free, prove it. A dare. 28-year-old married women apparently still played truth or dare, and the dare was to destroy their marriages in front of an audience. The maturity level was staggering. So you kissed Logan because your friends dared you to? Yes, she said eagerly, like I'd finally understood her brilliant reasoning. It wasn't about him. It wasn't about wanting him. It was about proving I wasn't controlled by you. The twisted logic was amazing. She'd publicly cheated on me to prove she wasn't controlled by me, which somehow made it better than if she'd just wanted to cheat. Like the motivation mattered more than the action. And the Instagram stories? I asked. Was that also peer pressure? She had the grace to look embarrassed about that. I was drunk and angry, she admitted. I felt like you'd abandoned me at the party, left me there to deal with everyone staring and whispering. So I wanted you to feel what I was feeling. What she was feeling. She'd felt abandoned, so she decided to make me feel humiliated. Eye for an eye, except in her version, public adultery was equivalent to leaving a party early. The thing is, she continued, leaning forward with this earnest expression, Logan was invited by the girls specifically. They planned this whole thing to test whether you really trusted me. Wait, what? They invited your ex-boyfriend to test my trust? I asked, making sure I was hearing this correctly. They wanted to see if you'd freak out or be cool about it. She explained like this made perfect sense. And when you got all jealous and possessive, it kind of proved their point. The mental gymnastics required to make this my fault were truly Olympic level. Her friends had orchestrated a situation designed to trigger jealousy. She'd responded by making out with her ex, and somehow this proved I was the problem for not being cool with orchestrated adultery. I regret it, she said suddenly, her voice cracking with what sounded like genuine emotion. I regret all of it. The kissing, the stories, everything. I just wanted to feel free for one night, and it got completely out of hand. Free. There was that word again. Freedom from the oppressive burden of not cheating on your spouse. Do you still have contact with Logan? I asked. No, she said quickly. Too quickly. That night was it. I swear. I haven't talked to him since. What about the other guys from the party? What other guys? But her eyes shifted when she said it, and I knew she was lying. The ones you were dancing with. The ones in the stories. Oh, them. No, those were just random people. I don't even remember their names. Random people she'd been grinding on and making out with. Random people whose hands had been all over my wife while she documented it for posterity. But she didn't even remember their names, so that made it okay. I know this looks bad, she said, reaching across the space between us like she wanted to touch me but didn't quite dare. But you have to understand, I was hurt and angry and drunk, and I made terrible decisions. But they were just decisions, not reflections of how I feel about you. Terrible decisions. That's what we were calling it now. Not betrayal, not adultery, not public humiliation. Just some unfortunate decision-making that happened to involve her tongue in other men's mouths. I love you, she said, and for the first time since I'd arrived, she looked genuinely vulnerable. I love you so much that the thought of losing you is killing me. This week has been the worst week of my entire life. The worst week of her life. She'd spent it stalking me, manipulating our families, and making threats, but it had been terrible for her. The victim complex was truly astounding. I know I hurt you, she continued, tears starting to form in her eyes. I know I crossed lines I shouldn't have crossed. But please, please don't let one night destroy everything we've built together. One night. Still minimizing, still trying to compress months of disrespect and a public betrayal into a single evening of poor judgment. I leaned forward, making sure my voice was gentle and understanding. I need to see what really happened that night, I said. I need to understand the full scope of what I'm supposed to forgive. She blinked, confusion flickering across her face. What do you mean? Do you have videos from that night? From your phone or from your friends? I need to see everything if I'm going to move past this. The request hung in the air between us like a loaded gun. She could refuse and prove she was still hiding things, or she could comply and show me evidence that would probably destroy any chance of reconciliation. Her face went through a complex series of emotions: hope, fear, calculation, resignation. Finally, she reached for her phone. There might be a few, she said hesitantly, but they look worse than they actually were. You have to understand, phones make everything seem more dramatic than it really was. Phones don't lie, I thought. People do. She unlocked her phone with trembling fingers, opened her photo gallery, and hesitated for a moment before turning the screen toward me. These don't tell the whole story, she said as I took the phone from her hands. She was right about that. They told a much worse story than I'd imagined. Taking Marissa's phone felt like accepting a loaded weapon from someone who'd already shot you once. I knew whatever was on that device would either confirm my worst fears or reveal something so much worse that my current nightmare would look like a pleasant daydream by comparison. The photo gallery opened to her recent pictures, and Jesus Christ, it was like scrolling through the digital documentation of a marriage's death. She had 15 videos from Derek's party. 15. Not the 7 Instagram stories I'd seen. Those were apparently just the highlight reel. She'd been documenting the whole night, like she was making a fucking documentary about infidelity. Start with that one, she said nervously, pointing to a video thumbnail that showed her laughing with a group of people. But remember, it looks worse on camera than it actually was. Right. Because cameras are notorious for making innocent behavior look slutty. Everyone knows phones have that special, make everything seem like cheating filter built right in. I hit play on the first video and immediately understood why she'd been hesitant to show me. This wasn't just dancing or innocent flirting. This was my wife performing for the camera like she was auditioning for a reality show called How to Destroy Your Marriage in 10 Easy Steps. The video showed her grinding against some guy I didn't recognize, her hands in his hair while he gripped her waist. But the worst part wasn't even the physical contact. It was her face. She looked happier than I'd seen her in months. Genuinely, radiantly happy in a way that made my stomach turn. See, she said quickly as the video ended. It's just dancing. Everyone was dancing like that. Everyone. Right. Because grinding on strangers was apparently the universal dance style at parties now. I must have missed that memo from the International Dance Committee. Next one, I said, scrolling to the second video. This one was worse. Much worse. It showed her whispering something into Logan's ear while he laughed and pulled her closer. The intimacy was obvious, undeniable. These weren't the actions of someone being peer-pressured into proving a point. These were the actions of someone who wanted to be exactly where she was. What are you whispering to him? I asked. I don't remember, she said quickly. I was drunk. It was pee. Small talk. Sure. Because everyone whispers sweet nothings about the weather and current events into their ex-boyfriend's ear while pressing their body against his. The third video made me want to throw her phone against the wall. It was the kiss, the one I'd witnessed in person, but filmed from a different angle. I could see her friends in the background, Grace holding up her own phone to record, Tina clapping and laughing. Leah cheering like this was the greatest moment in human history. But what I hadn't seen from across the room was Marissa's reaction after the kiss ended. She looked directly into Grace's camera and smiled. Not an embarrassed, oops I can't believe I just did that smile, but a triumphant, satisfied grin that said mission accomplished. You smiled? I said, pausing the video on her face. Right after you kissed him, you looked into the camera and smiled. I was drunk, she repeated, but her voice was getting smaller. I wasn't thinking clearly. You look pretty clear-headed to me, I said, scrolling to the next video. Let's keep going. Video 4 showed her accepting drinks from multiple guys, laughing and flirting like she was working the room at a singles bar. Video 5 was her slow dancing with someone who definitely wasn't Logan, her head on his shoulder, looking content and peaceful. You're making this seem worse than it was, she said, her voice taking on that defensive edge I knew so well. Everyone was drinking, everyone was having fun. It wasn't personal. Not personal. Making out with her ex-boyfriend while her husband watched wasn't personal. The logic was bulletproof. Videos 6 through 10 were a montage of escalating behavior. More dancing, more touching, more intimate moments with men who weren't her husband. Each one was a little knife twist, but I kept my expression neutral. I was gathering evidence, not getting emotionally invested in the train wreck I was watching. Video 11 made my blood pressure spike. It showed her in a corner of Derek's living room with 2 guys I didn't recognize, all 3 of them laughing while one of them kissed her neck. She looked like she was having the time of her life. Who are these guys? I asked. I don't know, she admitted. Friends of Derek's, maybe? Everyone was just loose that night. Inhibited. It was that kind of party. That kind of party. The kind where married women make out with strangers while their husbands watch. Apparently, I'd been going to the wrong kinds of parties my whole life. Keep going, I said. Videos 12 and 13 were more of the same. My wife treating Derek's birthday party like her personal sexual awakening tour. But video 14 was where things got really interesting. It started after I'd left the party, based on the timestamp. The video showed Marissa back with Logan, but this time there was no audience of friends cheering her on. This was just them, in what looked like Derek's bedroom, and holy shit, this wasn't just kissing anymore. Logan's hands were everywhere, under her dress, in her hair, gripping her ass while she kissed him with the kind of passion I hadn't seen from her in our bedroom in over a year. She was pressed against the wall, her legs wrapped around his waist, and the sounds she was making. Turn it off, she said suddenly, lunging for the phone. That's enough. But I pulled it away, pausing the video on a frame that showed her face in profile. She looked lost in the moment, completely absorbed in what she was doing. This wasn't peer pressure or drunken mistakes or proving a point to her friends. This was a woman getting exactly what she wanted. It looks worse on video, she said desperately. Cameras make everything seem more intense. Marissa, I said calmly. His hands were under your dress. It didn't go that far, she said quickly. We just kissed. It looked like more, but it was just kissing. Just kissing. With his hands up her dress, her legs around his waist, pressed against a wall in someone's bedroom. The definition of just kissing had apparently expanded significantly since I last checked. There's one more, I said, scrolling to video 15. No, she said, reaching for the phone again. You don't need to see that one. It's not important. Not important. Which meant it was the most important one of all. I hit play before she could stop me. The final video was a masterpiece of betrayal. It showed the aftermath, Marissa and Logan fixing their clothes, laughing about something, her running her fingers through her hair to make it look less like she'd been horizontal 5 minutes earlier. You could hear her voice clearly. God, I needed that. I forgot how good we were together. I forgot how good we were together. She'd said that about her ex-boyfriend. About the man she'd just been intimate with in someone else's bedroom while her husband drove home alone. Turn it off, she whispered, her face completely drained of color. But I let it play to the end, where Logan kissed her forehead and said, "Call me tomorrow." And she responded with, "Definitely." Definitely. She'd planned to call him the next day. This wasn't a one-time drunken mistake. It was the beginning of something. I set her phone down on the coffee table and looked at her. Really looked at her. The woman sitting across from me bore no resemblance to the person I'd married. That person had been caring, honest, loyal. This person was a stranger wearing my wife's face. It looks worse than it was, she said again, but her voice was barely audible now. Actually, I said, reaching into my pocket, I think it looks exactly like what it was. I pulled out my phone and showed her the screen. The red recording light was blinking steadily, and the timer showed 37 minutes and counting. Her face went completely white. You recorded this? Every word, I confirmed. Your confession about the peer pressure, the plan set up with Logan, the admission that you were going to call him the next day. All of it. She stared at my phone like it was a venomous snake. You tricked me. No, I said. I gave you a chance to tell the truth, and you chose to lie instead. Even when you thought we were reconciling, even when you thought I was coming back to you, you still couldn't be honest about what happened. The tears started then. Real ones this time, not the calculated crying she'd been using all week. These were the tears of someone who'd just realized they'd completely fucked themselves over. Please don't use that recording, she begged. Please. I'll do anything. I'll delete everything. I'll never talk to Logan again. I'll change completely. Too late, I said, standing up. You had a week to tell me the truth. Instead, you lied to me, stalked me, manipulated our families, and just now tried to gaslight me even when you thought we were getting back together. She collapsed forward, her head in her hands. Oh God, what have I done? You showed me exactly who you really are, I said, and I'm finally smart enough to believe you. Hashtag Chapter 10, Her Collapse, My Freedom. Revenge, they say, is a dish best served cold. But let me tell you something. Revenge served with digital evidence and family group chats hits different. It's not just cold. It's Arctic fucking freeze your soul solid satisfying. I sat in my car outside Marissa's apartment building for exactly 3 minutes, composing the message that would end this nightmare once and for all. The recording was already uploaded to the cloud. The videos were saved in multiple locations, and I had enough evidence to convince anyone with half a brain that my wife was a lying, cheating sociopath who tried to gaslight me into thinking I was the problem. Time to share the wealth. I created a group message that included both sets of parents and Clara, the nuclear option, the digital equivalent of dropping a truth bomb on everyone who'd been fed Marissa's victim narrative for the past week. The message was simple. Since there seems to be confusion about what happened at Derek's party, I thought everyone should see the actual evidence. Then I attached everything. The videos from her phone showing the escalating infidelity, the audio recording of her confession where she admitted it was all planned, the screenshots of her Instagram stories where she'd called herself single. 3 years of marriage reduced to a digital evidence folder that painted a picture so damning it would make a prosecutor weep with joy. I hit send and watched my phone light up like a Christmas tree. My mom texted back within 30 seconds. Proud of you, son. Dad followed immediately. She's finished. Good riddance. Clara's response was pure poetry. Holy shit. What a psychopath. I'm changing the locks on my house in case she shows up here too. But the real entertainment came from Marissa's parents. 20 minutes of absolute silence, then a curt message from Patricia. Marissa, come home immediately. No apology for calling me vindictive. No acknowledgement that they'd spent the week harassing me based on complete lies. Just a summons for their daughter to return home and face whatever music was about to play. I was still sitting in my car, watching the digital fireworks, when Marissa came stumbling out of her building. She looked like she'd seen a ghost. Which, in a way, she had. The ghost of her carefully constructed lies, now thoroughly dead and buried. She spotted my car and ran toward it like I was her last hope for salvation. I rolled down the window, curious to hear what excuse she'd come up with for this latest development. You sent it to everyone, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. My parents, your parents, everyone. Just the people you lied to, I replied calmly. Seemed like they deserved to know the truth. She collapsed against my car door, literally fell to her knees on the asphalt like some kind of dramatic movie heroine. Don't do this, she begged, grabbing my arm through the open window. Please. I'll do anything. I'll delete everything. I'll change completely. I'll never see Logan again. Too late for all that, I said, gently but firmly removing her hand from my arm. You had multiple chances to tell the truth. Instead, you chose to lie, manipulate, and gaslight everyone who cared about you. I was scared, she sobbed. I was scared you'd leave me if you knew the whole truth. The irony was beautiful. She'd been scared I'd leave her if I knew the truth, so she'd decided to lie about it, which guaranteed I'd leave her when I eventually found out. The logic was flawless. This is the last time we'll ever speak, I told her, my voice steady and final. Contact me again, directly or through other people, and I'll file harassment charges. Her face crumpled completely. You can't mean that. We're married. We took vows. Yeah, we did, I agreed. You broke them. I'm honoring the part about till death do us part. This marriage died last Saturday night. I started the engine, and she stumbled backward but didn't leave. Just stood there in the parking lot, crying and broken, finally experiencing the consequences of her actions. As I drove away, I caught a glimpse of her in my rearview mirror. She was still on her knees, phone pressed to her ear, probably calling anyone who might listen to her latest sob story about the cruel husband who'd abandoned her. My phone started buzzing before I'd made it out of the parking lot. Voice message after voice message, 20 of them in the span of 10 minutes. Don't do this. Please. I'm sorry, I'm so fucking sorry. Answer me. You can't just leave it like this. I'll kill myself if you don't come back. Please, I'm begging you. Each message was more hysterical than the last, her voice getting higher and more desperate with every plea. But here's the beautiful thing about hitting rock bottom. Once you're there, threats of going deeper don't scare you anymore. I turned my phone off and smiled. Actually smiled, for the first time in months that wasn't forced or fake. The silence was incredible. No buzzing, no notifications, no emotional manipulation disguised as love. Just pure, clean quiet that felt like taking a deep breath after being underwater for too long. That night, I sat on my couch, our couch, and ordered pizza for one. I watched whatever I wanted on TV without negotiating. I went to bed at a reasonable hour without waiting for someone to come home from God knows where. I slept through the night without being woken up by drunk confessions or late-night phone calls. It was the most peaceful night I'd had in years. Sunday morning brought a knock at my door, not frantic pounding or dramatic sobbing, just a quiet knock. I looked through the peephole and saw a woman I didn't recognize holding an envelope. "Process server," she said when I opened the door. "Are you Marcus Thompson?" "That's me. These are for you," she said, handing me the envelope with a sympathetic smile. "Sorry about your situation." Inside were divorce papers. Marissa had beaten me to the punch by exactly 12 hours. I laughed out loud reading through them. She was citing irreconcilable differences and emotional abandonment. The woman who'd publicly cheated on me was claiming I'd abandoned her emotionally. The victim narrative was so strong it had survived even filing for divorce. But buried in the legal language was the real kicker. She was asking for alimony. The woman who destroyed our marriage was demanding I pay her for the privilege of being rid of her. I called my lawyer Monday morning. By Tuesday, I'd filed my counterpetition with enough evidence to convince any judge that Marissa's version of events was complete fiction. The videos, the recording, the text messages, everything was documented, cataloged, and ready for court. She'd thought cheating on me to my face would put me in my place. She'd thought I'd crawl back like I always had, desperate and apologetic and grateful for whatever scraps of affection she was willing to throw me. Instead, I'd walked away, and I'd left her to drown in her own lies. The freedom was intoxicating. No more walking on eggshells, no more making excuses for someone else's shitty behavior, no more pretending that disrespect was love. For the first time in years, I could breathe.